My Marvel superhero girlfriend. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author. We are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 151, The Sea is Broken. Nearly 5,000 words. Please subscribe to support. The sun sets, and night falls. The massive waves that struck like ancient beasts recede, leaving behind a colorful heap of marine debris and shipwrecks. Moonlight casts a shadow over the town, which has sustained over 80% destruction. Rescue workers arrive by air and land, and high beams are set up across the city to provide search and illumination. Gwen, donning her spider suit, dismantles the black webs ahead of time, preventing the rescue helicopter from making an emergency landing over the town. Students and parents, along with surviving local employees and residents, are escorted out of the town in waves by the rescue team, wrapped in cold weather towels. While rescuing and evacuating the people, workers in protective suits are gradually disinfecting the town. After all, the vast amount of marine debris and dead creatures can breed a viral plague far more terrifying than even natural disasters. Atop a mountain on one side of the town, a tall, beautiful figure stands tall, her black hair ruffled by the night breeze. The ancient shield and sword she carries gleam in the moonlight, a cold and sacred glow. Whoosh! Another, slightly smaller figure leaped over, lithe and graceful, its feet shrouded in thin boots, shimmering green. Reaching the summit, Spider-Woman pushed aside her hood with one hand and ripped off her spider cowl with the other, revealing a mop of fluffy blonde hair beneath, a beautiful, delicate face gleaming against the moonlight. "Miss Diana, so you're Wonder Woman," Gwen exclaimed, beautiful and intelligent, looking up from the bag Nian had left behind. "Didn't Nian tell you before?" Wonder Woman Diana whispered, smiling softly. "No," Gwen shook her head. "He only told you a few things, about his hidden abilities and that Kara is Kryptonian. He never mentioned your superhero identity. Is that so?" Wonder Woman nodded slightly. Gwen paused, then said sincerely, "I think it's because he thinks your secret is more important than his own." Wonder Woman remained silent, her beautiful eyes, sparkling with wisdom, gazing at Gwen silently. Her clear eyes reflected the girl, still clad in her spider suit. Spider-Woman Gwen suddenly felt a flicker of panic. After all, she was completely different from her usual gentle and charming self. Her bouncing about was far from intellectual and graceful. But then, Diana said, "How about you call me Auntie from now on?" Gwen's eyes widened in surprise. "Is that really okay?" "If you'd like," Diana smiled and nodded. Of course I do." Gwen spoke hurriedly, her cheeks flushing slightly as she called out, "Auntie." Diana nodded in response, suggesting, "Let's go back to our original state. If we don't go back, your mother will be worried. Can't we wait for Nian?" Gwen's face flickered with worry as she gazed out at the starless sea. "Don't worry. Since he chose to do that, it proves he at least has the confidence to protect himself." Diana looked at her and said, "Didn't he gain his ability from you?" "Yes," Gwen blushed. "Meow." From the backpack she carried on her back, the soft meow of the little emperor echoed, as if to acknowledge that he had contributed his part. Meanwhile, on the other side of town, along the heavily wave-damaged coastline, a completely deformed and wrecked pickup truck lay stranded. His tangled, smelly hair draped over his drooping face, Aquaman Arthur Curry knelt on the trash-strewn beach, tightly cradling a man in his early 50s, his eyes closed, his lifeless form. With a crash, the normal waves and tides gently lapped against the shoreline. A middle-aged man, neatly combed hair and dressed like a gentleman, emerged from the sea, holding a silver trident. "Oh my God!" Vico, the Atlantis Empire's military advisor, sighed in disbelief at the sight before him. Aquaman, motionless, cradled his father's body, like a dead statue. All of this was started by Orm, and it's just a prelude to his provocation. He wants to provoke an all-out war between the underwater world and the terrestrial world. Vico looked at Aquaman solemnly and said quickly, "Arthur, I know you're very sad right now, but you must cheer up quickly. Only you have the chance to stop Orm. Save the Atlantis Empire." Aquaman raised his bloodshot eyes and growled angrily, "First, the Atlantis Empire killed my mother, And now it's killed my father, and you still want me to save it. The Atlantis Empire belongs to your mother. As the eldest prince, you should be the first heir to the empire. Vico said solemnly, and it was Orm who caused all this. Your anger should fall on him. Vico paused, then changed the subject. Also, your family isn't just your parents. Are you referring to your so-called half-brother, Orm? Aquaman clenched his fists. Not him. Vico shook his head and sighed. Your father probably didn't get to tell you. There's another important secret you don't know. The ocean, 10,000 meters beneath the sea. In the deep sea, inaccessible even to modern submarines, the immense pressure at depths of 10,000 meters is powerful enough to crush an ordinary submarine into a slab of scrap metal. Here, the deep sea is devoid of light, devoid of life, and utterly dark and cold, like a corner of the universe beyond the heavens. However, if one descends even further, reaching a vast underwater rift valley, one will discover a civilization far superior to the human world on land. The rift valley is dotted with underwater energy cannons and reconnaissance equipment. On one side, 1,000 tall giant stone statues stand guard. The nearby entrance glows with a brilliance far brighter than daylight on land. A light bridge, both the entrance and the exit, spans several kilometers across the rift valley. Numerous underwater spacecraft shuttle back and forth within this massive light bridge. This is the Kingdom of Atlantis, the kingdom's only gateway to the outside world. Within the light bridge, a two-person, jellyfish-shaped underwater spacecraft sails towards the Imperial Gateway. Sitting in the cockpit of the spaceship was the stunningly beautiful Mara, now clad in a strangely dark battlesuit, her usually vibrant red hair now of a voluptuous crimson. This is Atlantis. The darkened Mara, or Nian, the symbiotic master of his body, muttered. Through Mara, he continuously gained information about the underwater world. This underwater world, in fact, was the evolution of the ancient Atlantis Empire, once upon a time on Earth. Due to its incessant pursuit of technology, it was ravaged by uncontrolled technology, ultimately leading to the entire Atlantis Empire's fall from the land to the seabed, and its inhabitants gained the ability to live and inhabit the seabed. However, after the first emperor perished in the ocean carrying the sacred trident, the Atlantis Empire began to disintegrate, evolving into the current 7 kingdoms of the underwater world. The strongest of these was the Kingdom of Atlantis, the primary surviving power of the original Atlantis Empire. Yes, it was only a kingdom, though its inhabitants still called themselves empires. Next, the second most powerful nation is the Kingdom of Zabel, where Mara resides. There are also the Fisherman Kingdom, the Saltwater Kingdom, the Trench Kingdom, the Missing Kingdom, and the Mysterious Ancient Kingdom. The latter two kingdoms, the Missing Kingdom and the Mysterious Ancient Kingdom, have now vanished and fallen, while the citizens of the Trench Kingdom have degenerated into sea monsters. Therefore, only the last 4 truly kingdoms remain in the underwater world. The darkened Mara muttered to herself, so, if the Kingdom of Atlantis can gain the support of the remaining 3 kingdoms, Zabel, the Fisherman Kingdom, and the Saltwater Kingdom, then it can unify the underwater world. Mara's mind responded, now, my father has united with I'm about to marry you off, so naturally we'll be on the same side. Nian sneered. Mara was speechless. Thanks to their symbiotic relationship, she now knew a lot about a parasite named Nian that inhabited her body. So, he was just an ordinary human, a young teenager, a high school student 6 or 7 years her junior? Then, by making physical contact with another person and exchanging bodily fluids, could one possess their abilities for half a day? If it weren't for the massive wave Orm unleashed today, such a unique human being wouldn't have emerged. Mara mentally persuaded, Nian, stop. I'll handle the rest. Can you handle it? Ultimately, we still have to place our hopes on Aquaman, Nian replied. Mara remained silent. She truly needed the support of Aquaman to overthrow the reigning Orm. After all, her Kingdom of Zabel, no matter how great, couldn't compare to the profound heritage and legitimate imperial power of Atlantis. Since you have no other choice, why not try to cling to me? Nian said. In his opinion, matters involving power struggles like these were sometimes simple to handle. Mara's mind was filled with complex emotions. She already knew what Nian was planning. Starting today, the Kingdom of Atlantis, no, the underwater world, was about to undergo earth-shattering changes. The darkened Mara's small spaceship arrived at the National Border Control Point. Heavily armed underwater soldiers in white armor immediately approached with laser guns for verification. The scanner finally indicated diplomatic privileges for passage. As the princess of the Kingdom of Zebel and the fiancée of the Atlantean leader, Mara possessed convenient credentials. Thus, the spaceship passed unimpeded into the Kingdom of Atlantis. Thanks to Mara's noble bloodline, Nian could see underwater. The Atlantean kingdom that came into view was a magnificent spectacle. The waters were filled with underwater spaceships and marine life, and magnificent buildings perched on the seafloor, radiating the brilliance and aura of advanced technology and ancient civilization. If war broke out between the underwater world and the terrestrial world, with their technological superiority, the chances of victory would be slim. A massive tsunami from strategic weapons alone could raze many nations to the ground. Of course, the terrestrial world's strength lay in its individual strengths. The Avengers and the Justice League were no pushovers. If an all-out war truly breaks out, there are only a few entities the underwater world can't afford to offend. Nian couldn't help but wonder. Could there actually be so many terrifyingly powerful beings on land? Mara was secretly shocked, feeling unbelievable. In fact, back on land, just as the news broke of the urgent news report of a coastal town being struck by a massive wave, a young woman appeared 1,000 meters above the seaside town. The clouds parted, and moonlight fell. A red cape fluttered in the cold, strong night breeze, and the girl's golden hair flowed freely. Her skirt, which fell above her knees, defied gravity and hung flat. An S-shaped family totem etched itself between her well-developed breasts, and the black silk stockings shimmered beneath her graceful legs. The girl appeared somewhat delicate and cute, but the unique force field emanating from her body, combined with the power contained within her battlesuit, was enough to shatter the turbulent clouds in the sky. Nian, not here. Like a special young deity, Superwoman gazed down from above. A quick glance confirmed that Nian was nowhere to be found among the people evacuating from the town and surrounding areas 1,000 meters below. Hey, what's that? Supergirl glanced toward the sea beyond the town, as if she had spotted something. She instantly moved, accompanied by a powerful hurricane, followed by the resounding sound of the sound barrier breaking. Bang! The sea surface was like being struck by a meteorite. The previously peaceful sea surface erupted into a vortex extending directly to the seabed. What happened? Shark King Nanavi, who was shoving a human corpse into his mouth, opened his eyes wide and spotted a young girl floating in the center of the vortex ahead. Mr. Talking shark? Excuse me. Supergirl Kara waved a friendly hand, her eyes gleaming with a faint, fiery crimson light. Atlantis, in the royal palace. The buildings here are even more magnificent and spacious. Within each building, there are vast, unobstructed halls stretching dozens of meters, all painted a pristine white. Magnificent, sacred, majestic, and ancient. The palace, illuminated by its own light, is truly luminous. Its location beneath the deep sea makes it appear even more pristine and magnificent. The darkened Mara swam in at a steady pace. The patrolling soldiers observed her, but no one attempted to stop her, allowing her to proceed directly into the palace. Inside the palace, a handsome man in golden armor sat on the main throne. He smiled as he conversed with a middle-aged man in a guest seat. Both wore cloaks symbolizing royal power and nobility, one gold, the other silver, each exuding an air of authority and prestige. His Majesty, the current ruler of Atlantis, and Nereus, the king of the second most powerful nation, Zebel. Seeing someone enter the main hall without being summoned, Orm frowned, but when he looked up and saw the person entering, his frown quickly relaxed. Mara, you're here. My daughter. Nereus, standing next to him, laughed and teased, do you think this place is your home? You've come in without any manners. Orm smiled and waved, it's okay, it's okay. It won't be long before this is truly Mara's home. As if she hadn't heard, the darkened Mara landed on the floor from the water and walked up the steps one step at a time. Nereus frowned, worried that His Highness Orm would be displeased, and he was the first to shout a rebuke. Mara, shouldn't you salute His Highness Orm? And what's wrong with your clothes? Mara, what's wrong with you? Orm quickly stood up from the main seat and looked at his fiancée approaching. The two sides were now less than 5 meters apart. My father is here too. Nian, please stop. Mara pleaded in her mind. Let's just end it, the darkened Mara spoke, raising her slender, empty right hand. This was what Nian said to and also to Mara. End it. Froze for a moment, Then a heart-pounding chill shot up his spine and into his brain. Wanted to retreat, to call for help, to dodge, but the moment the thought crossed his mind, puff! The surrounding seawater exploded, leaving him in a dry area. A dark sickle, like an enlarged, sharp claw, pierced directly through the chest of golden armor. The tip of the dark sickle rose from his back, piercing through him, propelling his tall and strong body upwards. It's exactly chapter 150, and I've written enough. It's been a while since I've asked for votes, so please support me with your monthly votes. A new female supporting role has been added to the column, Mara. Likes are welcome. Chapter 152, King Killing, The Sea Trembles. The Kingdom of Atlantis, a white, holy palace. Inside the Great Hall, before the throne, crimson hair danced wildly in the water. In the slender, white right hand of the blackened Mara, a dark scythe conjured from thin air, pierced and lifted from the air. The figure, the most powerful being in Atlantis, was now pierced by the scythe's end. The Atlantean armor was ripped apart as easily as paper, just as a massive wave ripped through the Marine Life Research Museum. As his body was lifted, bit by bit, from the water, Orm's handsome face was filled with disbelief. As he jerked backward, the golden crown on his head seemed to teeter on the brink of collapse. A stream of crimson blood gushed from his chest and back, staining the incoming waters crimson. Why? Orm couldn't believe it, couldn't accept it. Just a moment ago, he had been so full of energy, poised to rule the oceans, and now he was about to be killed by the very beauty he had considered his own. Aren't you seeking revenge on humanity? Now that you've provoked me, I'm seeking revenge on you. Isn't that only natural? The darkened Mara, motionless, clutching the dark scythe, gazed at the reigning king of the sea and whispered softly. Who are you? Before could finish, the darkened Mara swung the dark scythe backward, sending Om's hunched body flying backwards, stirring the seawater into a murky blood red in its path. It crashed heavily into the vast main hall below the steps. A deathly silence fell over the palace, 10,000 meters beneath the sea. From the moment Mara, controlled by the Nian parasite, arrived at the throne to the moment she attacked His Majesty less than 3 seconds passed. The Atlantean royal guard stationed around the palace, including King Nereus, seated in the guest seat at Zebul, all froze in their places, as if petrified. No one could have anticipated Mara's actions. After a moment or two of dead silence, the palace erupted like a beehive. Lord capture Mara of Zebul. Call for backup. Mara has assassinated Lord The waters roiled. Over a dozen royal guards in metal armor, wielding tridents, charged through the water at breakneck speed, madly and furiously surrounding the blackened Mara, who remained standing on the platform. Each one of them, like a human swordfish, bursting with sharp brilliance. The intertwined murderous intent chilled the palace to a chilling inferno. Mad, crazy. Mara, do you know what you're doing? Nereus, rising from his guest seat, trembled all over, unsure what to do. Although he wanted to save his daughter as a father, acting now would inevitably trigger a brutal war between the two kingdoms. Killing Lord the ruler of Atlantis, in the palace of the Kingdom of Atlantis was far worse than the incident 20 years prior when the Atlantean queen fell in love with a human man. Facing the dozen or so guards closing in on her, the darkened Mara made no attempt to dodge, merely thrusting her hands outward. Don't kill them. Mara's mind called out in time. As her thoughts echoed, the surrounding seawater, centered around the darkened Mara, surged outward with force. Before the dozen or so guards could reach her, they were thrown, weapons and all, against the palace walls. With a slight wave of her hand, the darkened Mara's trident was swept up by the waves, perfectly grasping it. Weighing the weight of the weapon, the darkened Mara casually threw it towards the still-living Orm in the main hall. The trident pierced the water and transformed into a white arrow. Your Highness Orm. The fallen guard cried out in shock. Just as the trident was about to pierce Orm's head, a tall, burly black figure burst through the palace gate at breakneck speed. The other man single-handedly lifted the critically wounded, near-death Orm from the ground and returned toward the palace's main entrance. The trident whizzed past him at high speed, nailing him to the palace floor in a bloody mess. A tear ripped through his black cloak and inner shoulder. The black figure groaned in pain and sped through the water, carrying Orm out of the palace, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Oh, who's that? The darkened Mara looked surprised. This person's underwater speed was probably even faster than the royal Orm. I don't know who he is. Mara's mind trembled in shock. She had been in Atlantis for so long, and she had no idea such a mysterious figure lurked within the palace. "Never mind, Orm won't live much longer anyway," Xinian said unconcerned. Due to the nature of the devourer race, the wounds inflicted by his claws could never heal. With Orm's piercing wound, even the most advanced Atlantean technology could not possibly revive him. "Right, time for me to escape too." Xinian manipulated Mara's body with a slight movement. The seawater at the site boiled and exploded, and she rushed towards the palace gate like a streak of red and black light. "Stop her. Don't let her escape." The underwater soldiers outside, hearing the news, tried to stop her, but a surge of undercurrent stirred up around the blackened Mara, knocking dozens of soldiers off their feet. Forget stopping her, even getting close was impossible. Today, every Atlantean looking up could see a black figure, carrying the undercurrent, swiftly streaking across the kingdom, seemingly accelerating with no limit until it crashed into the completely sealed national gate. Bang! The woman's body, with its incredible strength, carried the surging seawater around her, destroying everything, shattering the gate's energy shield and escaping from the kingdom of Atlantis. However, it wasn't so much an escape as it was a forced escape. Gazing at the shimmering energy lights at the kingdom's gates and the chaotic volley of laser cannons outside, many Atlanteans were speechless with shock. Soon, when news of Lord Orm's assassination spread from the palace, the nation erupted in outrage. Princess Mara of the Kingdom of Zebel had severely wounded Lord Orm to the point of near death, and yet Mara had successfully escaped the kingdom? Was your hearing damaged, or was I hallucinating? The underwater inhabitants of the sea were stunned. The Atlantean army was in a frenzy, dispatching armed ships one after another, determined to rip the ocean apart and capture the culprit Mara. When this devastating assassination news reached the other underwater kingdoms, it also unleashed a tsunami-like uproar. Zebel, the second most powerful nation, was shocked and enraged. On the one hand, they wondered why Princess Mara had acted so violently. On the other, King Zebel, who was also in the palace at the time, had been captured by the Atlanteans. It could be said. From the moment the evil Mara attacked them, the entire underwater world was completely shattered. Chapter 153 I Want You to Be the Emperor. The maximum speed in the seawater exceeded Mach 10, meaning it was faster than a Black Hawk fighter jet in the sky. Gurgling. An undercurrent rippled through the seabed, leaving the pursuing underwater spaceship far behind. Diving up to a peaceful offshore area, the undercurrent dissipated, revealing Mara, clad in a black battlesuit. Xinian, you've ruined me. Mara's mind drifted in despair. Zebel is finished too. The kingdom of Atlantis will vent its anger over Orm's death on the kingdom of Zebel. But this way, the alliance between the two countries ends, and the war between the underwater world and the terrestrial world ends prematurely. Are you satisfied with this outcome? Mara concluded with a bitter thought. Yet, she couldn't bring herself to hate Xinian. After all, it was Orm's own fault. What are you talking about? Xinian thought to himself. I don't intend to turn the underwater world into chaos, with several great nations slaughtering each other. Killing Orm is just the first thing I'm going to do. What else do you want? Mara asked, alarmed, sensing a sinister premonition. I want you to be the Empress, Mara. As Xinian spoke, the undercurrents of the ocean seemed to surge, bubbles erupting. What did you say? Mara was stunned. Her mind, connected in a symbiotic state with Xinian, knew his words weren't empty lies, but rather a genuine desire. Xinian spoke in a deep voice, more than just the king of Zebel, or even Atlantis. I want you to unite the 7 kingdoms and become the true emperor of the underwater world. For him, simply killing Orm wasn't enough. If Orm died, there would be a second and a third Orm. As long as the Atlantean royal family harbored aversion to humans, they could provoke a war between the two lands at any moment, furthering the internal friction among Earth's supernatural forces. So, it would be better to unite the underwater world and support a suitable candidate as emperor. For Xinian, Mara was a perfect fit. Connecting with Mara's thoughts, Xinian knew that Mara had no aversion to humans. She was even curious about and yearned for the terrestrial world. Most importantly, Mara was no less capable than any other royal in the underwater kingdom. For example, her unique ability to control water was a gift unmatched by any other royal, making her the nemesis of the underwater people. Because she was a woman, Mara could not inherit Zebel's throne and was even betrothed to Orm, the ruler of Atlantis. Even if she wanted to overthrow Orm, she could only do so by assisting the exiled Sea King Arthur. Indeed, in the underwater kingdom, Even the most privileged and powerful women were reduced to mere ornaments, the preserve of others. For example, the former queen of Atlantis, who publicly proclaimed herself queen, fell in love with a human man, only to be captured by Atlantis and forced to bear a child worthy of the throne. Mara, think it through. Xenian's thoughts were clear, his mind articulating them with pure intent. Do you want to be the emperor of the sea, controlling everything in your own hands, or just a supporting role, pinning all your hopes and everything on the Sea King, empress of the undersea world? Can I do that? Not only Atlantis, but even the kingdom of Zelber wouldn't agree. Mara didn't answer directly, but her heart was clearly moved. Of course, as long as you obtain that one thing. Xenian replied firmly. Mara understood. You mean the lost trident artifact? That's the scepter that can control the entire ocean. However, to possess that, you must possess the potential of an emperor. Didn't we just kill a so-called king? Xenian said nonchalantly. I don't believe in qualifications. If you don't even have the confidence to be an emperor, how can you become one? I understand. Mara struggled with her thoughts, then quickly reached a final decision. Then let's do it, Xenian. You're not yet fully prepared, Xenian warned. Help me, I want to be the empress. Mara responded in a deep voice. Very good, as you wish. Xenian smiled. The darkened Mara opened her bright and beautiful eyes. At this moment, countless fish circled around her graceful body, their scales gleaming with a dazzling silver light under the water's light, as if giving her a circle of sacred halo, and a confident and luxurious aura surged outward. This time, not only physically, but also mentally, body and spirit, Mara was willing to merge with Xenian and stand on the same front. Mara no longer interfered with Xenian's control of his body, allowing the symbiosis between the two to become increasingly perfect. On the shore. Vico, what did you say? Aquaman Arthur stared at Vico in front of him. That's right. You have a younger brother, a true blood brother. Vico said, of course. It could also be an older brother. You two are twins from the same mother. Even your mother couldn't tell which was born first. After all, you looked almost identical when you were little. But my father never told me that, Arthur said blankly, looking down at his father's peaceful face in his arms. That's because, when you were born, one of you was taken away by Atlantean soldiers. Vico said solemnly, but he's still alive, living in the Atlantean palace. His name is Namor. Atlantis, a palace area. The sea surged. A black figure, carrying Orm, passed through the oxygen barrier with a boo sound, arriving in a room in the waterless area. He laid the severely injured Orm on the bed. The black figure reached out and peeled off his cloak, revealing a tough face that bore a resemblance to Arthur, though without the beard. He was also bare-chested, muscular, and sturdy, his lower body clad in a pair of tight, black scale trousers. I never thought it would be you, a bastard, who saved me. Orm said, blood gushing from his mouth, looking at the man beside the bed. I'm not saving you. I'm just letting you live a little longer, so you can experience the despair of losing everything. Namor sneered. That's good, that's good. I don't need your rescue. I just can't accept my mother. Orm laughed bitterly, blood pouring out of his body, staining the mattress red. He spoke with difficulty. Mara, she has a tracking device. With these last words, Orm closed his eyes and died. Namor remained unmoved, his face still impassive. He stepped forward and grasped the blood-stained crown from Orm's head. Don't worry. I will continue the work you failed to accomplish, unifying the underwater world, and then cleansing the land of the filthy humans. As for Mara, I'll help you kill her. Namor placed the crown on his head, his words cold and firm. Chapter 154 Mara, imagination is prohibited. In the heart of the Mediterranean. Are you sure it's here? The final guidance points to this location. It should be right down there. A beautiful figure floated in the shallow waters, her crimson hair cascading down her shoulders. The darkened Mara seemed to mutter to herself, questioning and answering herself. This place was deep sea off Italy, over 1,000 kilometers away from the waters where Atlantis had previously been located. Previously, Xenian had controlled Mara's body and traveled to the Sea of Sand, also known as the Sahara Desert, reaching the ruins of a lost nation hidden beneath the desert. From there, she received the first guidance leading to the Trident artifact. Later, the darkened Mara traveled to Sicily, Italy, and received the final guidance to the artifact from the Greek ruins. Although they had almost circled half the earth, and had occasionally encountered Atlantean pursuers along the way. Only 6 hours had passed since Xinian and Mera had coexisted. The fusion and symbiosis continued. Xinian and Mera, who lived in symbiosis, finally arrived at the place of final guidance. Next, they just had to find the place where the former Emperor of Atlantis died and obtain the trident artifact that disappeared with him. The blackened Mera's body sank rapidly into the sea, causing almost no ripples or splashes. She sank towards the seabed below her, and the water flowed smoothly along her graceful body. Xinian, I know your true purpose. Mera suddenly snorted with her mind. You are thinking about pushing me to become the empress who rules over everything in the underwater world. In this way, it would be more fulfilling for the empress to be your concubine, right? Woman, you think too much? Xinian was speechless for a moment. He really didn't have that idea originally. But after hearing Mera mention it, it seems really good. Xinian's mind moved slightly. He imagined Mera ascending the throne of empress by day, her crimson hair elegantly tied up, crowned, clad in the majestic and commanding golden armor of a king, her trident in hand, commanding the 7 kingdoms and bringing the entire underwater world to her feet. At night, she would retreat to her own grand and desolate palace, reclining on the imperially appointed yet soft, fragrant bed, stripping off her armor and other belongings, and arranging her radiant, snow-white body like the inside of a shell. Well, as a young man full of passion, Xinian was simply imagining things. Everyone has their own impulses and fantasies about mermaids, cat-beast girls, and the like. But the problem was, Xinian and Mera were thinking alike. She was experiencing every scene that Xinian imagined. Mera's mind froze for a moment, and she couldn't help but follow Xinian's thoughts, subconsciously adding a few details. For example, the bed should be a pink-purple coral crystal. Her hair was elegant when tied up, but when it was loose, half draped over her smooth, slender back, it must have been even more stunning. For about half a second, Xinian and Mera's thoughts intertwined, completing a profoundly obscene fantasy. Xinian, stop. Don't keep thinking about it. Mera's mind suddenly screamed. It's not my fault, you're the one who brought this up. Xinian was beginning to lose patience. As both sides continued to add follow-up details, the fantasy became too real, almost making him believe he'd actually done it. Think of something else. Mera exclaimed in shock. If they continued to fantasize, they might even have the child. Xinian, already have one. So, you want to. Fact proved it. The more you force yourself not to think about one thing, the more you tend to think about it. Fortunately, their thoughts were quickly diverted by something else. Tisk. A terrifying black shadow, nearly 2 meters tall, rose from the seabed, claws and fangs bared as it pounced upon the sinking blackened Mera. Reacting with incredible speed, blackened Mera extended her right hand, and several dark tentacles immediately emerged from her armored arm, tightly entangling the tall, ferocious shadow. Gagaga. Thousands of sea monsters descended upon the darkened Mera, one after another, dense as a school of fish, coalescing into a dark cloud beneath the sea, wreaking havoc. The force was so massive, like a roaring tsunami, that the seas within a 10-kilometer radius were convulsed. Come. The darkened Mera threw the sea monster, entangled in its dark tentacles, downward. She grasped the water on either side with her 5 fingers, instantly controlling the water within 100 meters of her body. A faint deep blue light flickered within her beautiful eyes. With a violent movement of her hands, the darkened Mera seemed to grasp the surrounding water and pull it apart. A crash. The water within the 100-meter area spun rapidly, sweeping up the approaching sea monsters as if they were being thrown into a giant washing machine. Go. The darkened Mera thrust her hands upward, and the water, swirling like a tornado, swept up the dense swarm of sea monsters and sent them towards the sea above her head. The seawater continued to swirl and sling the sea monster upward, until it broke through the ocean surface and reached a height of 20 or 30 meters before bursting apart. What was that? At this moment, Arthur stood on the coast of Sicily, gazing at the strange sight that flashed by in the distant sea. Elsewhere, Namor followed Mera's tracking device and came closer to the waters. He half peeked out of the water and watched the sea monsters falling from the sky. Is it just up ahead? Namor muttered to himself. After defeating the swarm of sea monsters blocking their path, the darkened Mera continued to descend beneath the seabed, soon reaching the bottom of a swirling vortex, where undercurrents surged and flickered with lightning. Yes, the vortex was like a thundercloud in the sky, constantly emitting terrifying flashes of lightning. The darkened mirror did not hesitate, but instead accelerated and plunged headfirst into the center of the vortex. Passing through the vast, turbid vortex, a ray of light gradually appeared from the abyssal darkness of the seabed, like the sunlight of a normal day. The world seemed to be turned upside down. Boom! The water splashed everywhere. Nian controlled Mara's body and rushed out of the water. Suddenly, the view opened up. Mountains rose from the sky, waterfalls reflected rainbows and cascaded down. Golden sunlight bathed the dark figure. The legend is true. This is the hidden sea, the ocean at the heart of the earth. Mara exclaimed in her mind. Chapter 155 Trident Artifact. The darkened Mara landed on a nearby island in the hidden Earth Sea. Within the hidden Earth Sea, she could see many dinosaur creatures still alive, like pterosaurs, which should only exist as fossils, soaring freely in the air. As Mara stepped onto the beach, a female figure emerged from the island. She wore the tattered, worn uniform of an Atlantean noble, carrying a bow and arrows made from small dinosaur bones. Removing her somewhat intimidating helmet, she revealed a weathered yet graceful face. Her features and brows showed she was no less youthful than Mara's. Her figure, in particular, was as round and mature as a woman in her 30s. It seemed the food in the hidden Earth Sea was quite good. Mara, is that you? She exclaimed, as if unable to believe her eyes. Mara's mind cried out excitedly, it's Atlanta, the former queen of Atlantis. She's still alive. She taught me when I was little. It's me, Nian thought, feeling he should ruin the atmosphere of this encounter, so he controlled a darkened Mara to speak. Great. I never thought I'd see you again in my lifetime. Atlanta excitedly rushed forward and hugged the darkened Mara tightly. But after sniffing, a strange light flashed in her eyes. The darkened Mara remained motionless, her body somewhat stiff as she let him hold her. She's still alive. That's wonderful. Mara's mind sighed with emotion. Don't forget, we just killed one of her sons. No matter the reason, that's an indisputable fact, Nian reminded him mentally. He felt bad, but if it happened again, he would kill him again. Mara's mind also cried out in grief, unsure how to explain to Atlanta. Atlanta, why are you here? The darkened Mara asked. Still brimming with joy at the reunion, Atlanta said, 20 years ago, when Atlantis was sacrificed to the Trench tribe, I, like you, fought my way here. The dark Mara remained silent. He hadn't fought his way through, but had forced his way in. Atlanta, the dark Mara cut straight to the point. Do you know where the trident is? Of course, Atlanta nodded, pointing toward the waterfall on the island behind her. It's in the cave behind me. Did you break in here specifically to get the trident? She suddenly realized. That's right. The dark Mara didn't hide it from her, saying, I want to become the king of the sea. You. Atlanta stared at the dark Mara in amazement, her brow furrowed as she sighed. This is difficult, very difficult. No matter how difficult it is, I'm going to try, the dark Mara said, heading straight for the waterfall cave entrance. Atlanta looked at her from behind and tried to persuade her. Do you know? The trident is guarded by the legendary sea monster, Karazhan. I've tried for 20 years, but I can't get close to it. Only those with the potential to be a king can obtain it. The darkened Mara paused, turned back, and said to Atlanta, Atlanta, your son, Orm, is dead. I killed him. Also, I'm not the real Mara now. If you want to hate someone, hate me. With that, the darkened Mara walked into the waterfall area without looking back, disappearing into the cave entrance. Atlanta stood there, stunned, tears streaming down her face. In fact, from the moment she approached the darkened Mara, she had already vaguely sensed that her son's blood was stained on her hands. In the waterfall cave, the darkened Mara descended into a quiet and empty deep sea area, where the underground was dotted with architectural ruins left by ancient civilizations. On a deserted stone pedestal above the ancient ruins, a crowned and armored male skeleton sat. In its hand, tightly grasped a trident, seemingly forged from gold, gleaming faintly in the seawater with divine power. The trident before Nian felt a sense of déjà vu. That's right. It resembled the artifact carried by his aunt, as if crafted from the same place, perhaps using similar metals and craftsmanship. And Mara's mind registered the key point. The darkened Mara moved, approaching the gleaming golden trident. The hidden sea at the Earth's core. Two figures emerged from the sea, barely 10 seconds apart, arriving on the pristine island. Their features bore a resemblance, though one had a clean-shaven face, the other sporting a full beard. Upon arriving on the island, they exchanged glances. Though seeing each other for the first time, each instantly recognized the other. Namer. Aquaman Arthur raised an eyebrow. Arthur. Namer, the Sea King, frowned. Twins, meeting for the first time. You two, are you Arthur and Namer? Atlanta called out in a trance, watching the two people land on the island. Mother. Namer stepped forward quickly, then plopped down on the ground and said, I already know. Atlanta's face was filled with grief. Arthur also knelt on the ground. Mother, father. What did you say? Atlanta and Namer's faces changed at the words. It was clearly a reunion, but the bad news kept coming. Atlanta almost fainted. She looked at her two sons and said, You two. You must have come here for the trident artifact too, right? The artifact is behind the waterfall cave. The being who claimed to be not Mara just entered not long ago. If you also want to be king, then go and try it. Arthur and Namer exchanged a glance, then cast their sharp gazes toward the waterfall cave. Whoever obtains the artifact will be emperor. The darkened Mara approached the throne. Just as she reached for the trident, her hand only 3 meters away from the scepter, gurgle. You don't even have the true bloodline of Atlantis, and you want to obtain the trident. A hoarse, cold voice rang out from behind. The darkened Mara looked back and saw, from the end of the murky deep sea behind her, snake-like tentacles the size of a Boeing fuselage extended. There were not just one, but at a glance, 5 or 6, approaching with the oppressive force of a giant. What are you? The darkened Mara was undaunted. My name is Karazhan. I have guarded the artifact here for over 1,000 years, slaying countless thieves who sought to defile it. The mysterious being said hoarsely. Even though you can understand what I say, I still won't let you go. You carry a deeply evil aura. And you don't have the potential to be a king. Is that so? In that case. Before the blackened Mara could finish her words, her right hand, which had been stretched forward, suddenly transformed into a dark claw and grabbed the trident held by the Emperor's skeleton in front of her. Success. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Fighting for the Artifact. The blackened Mara's attack was incredibly fast, and her dark claws extended even faster, making them impossible to defend against. Even Karazhan, the guardian sea beast, had no time to react before her claws grasped the gleaming golden halberd handle in front of him. Buzz! The dark claws, swollen and elongated, brimming with feral, sinister energy, held it firmly in her grasp. The upright trident, a divine artifact, seemed to awaken. Its metal shaft hummed with a spirit, and golden ripples of divine power rippled outward, spreading hundreds of meters through the dark, tranquil waters, shaking the nearby deep sea and underwater ruins. The darkened Mara's actions completely infuriated Karazhan. Her hoarse voice grew sharp and furious, like an ancient god roaring beneath the sea, its tangible sound waves shaking the surrounding waters. Anyone who touches the artifact will be killed. The darkened Mara frowned, but it was her own dark claws that were unable to remove the trident from the old Emperor's skeletal grasp. Is it the lingering power of the old Emperor of Atlantis at work? Mara's mind trembled in shock. No, Nian, having wielded his aunt's artifact many times, responded. Not to mention the dead Emperor, a mere skeleton, even a living one couldn't stand up to him now. It was the trident itself, resisting him. Does it mean that one really needs to possess the potential to be a king in order to gain its recognition? The darkened Mara frowned slightly. The trident's awakened golden power transformed it into a sun beneath the sea, slowly expanding its dark claws from the handle. The trident artifact didn't recognize Mara. Or perhaps, it didn't recognize the Mara symbiotically controlled by Nian. Either way, this wasn't good news for either Nian or Mara. The darkened Mara's claws expanded again, resembling ferocious cat claws half the size of a human, shredding the artifact's radiant golden power. Nian tried to push harder, but a massive shadow swooped down from the side. Bang! The sea surged, the water pressure fluctuated. The snake-like tentacles, resembling a swooping Boeing, or like a magnified whip, lashed the darkened Mara from the throne and artifact, sending her flying. This blow, packed with immense force, was too much for any underwater dweller to withstand. The darkened mirror was sent flying backwards through the water, crashing into a half-abandoned ruin dozens of meters away. The ancient ruins shattered and exploded, clogging the surrounding waters. "You stubborn thief, damn you!" Karazhan growled in increasing rage. Though Black Mara's body had been flung away, her dark claws remained locked on the trident, unwilling to release. Her dark arms, like tentacles, stretched dozens of meters, plunging into the murky waters Black Mara had plunged into. "You won't even let me try. That's too much?" Black Mara muttered as mud and gravel rained down from the sea. "Didn't you try? I told you, you don't have the potential to be a king. You can't remove the trident." Karazhan growled sharply as a snake-like tentacle continued to swat down at her, like swatting a mosquito. Boom! The seabed surrounding the blackened mirror was enveloped by tentacles. The serpentine tentacles, more powerful than mountains, slammed down, shaking the entire area violently. Countless seabed ruins, debris, and mud were thrown upward. "Huh?" Karazhan exclaimed in surprise. Its tail didn't feel the physical force of a creature being crushed, but instead, it felt an undeniable force emanating from its very center. Gurgling, the surrounding seawater and mud surged outward, and the massive serpentine tentacle slowly rose. The blackened mirror extended one hand, grasping the trident, while her free left hand and shoulder supported the base of the serpentine tentacle. Her small body erupted with astonishing strength, lifting the serpentine tentacle. The symbiote, the phallus, and Mara's physical abilities, combined with the spider's physical strength, achieved a perfect fusion. Dark Mara's physique and strength reached astonishing levels. Even if she couldn't match the average Kryptonian with a buggy underwater, she was far superior to the Hulk. Watching this scene from the shadows, Karazhan murmured inexplicably, as if in remembrance and reminiscence, "I've seen a being with a physique as powerful as yours, but sadly, he's long gone." "Who?" Dark Mara asked curiously. Nian was certain. The powerful being Karazhan was referring to wasn't the old emperor. Perhaps it was the one who created the trident, or perhaps even an even older being. Karazhan was about to say something when he suddenly sneered, "Two more people have entered, two half-blooded bastards. This place hasn't been this lively in 1,000 years." As he spoke, two tall men dived down from the waterfall caverns and emerged from the deep sea of the old emperor's ancient ruins. They were none other than Arthur and Namor, the twins of the former Queen of Atlantis. Before Arthur and Namor could fully grasp their surroundings, they were swatted by one of Karazhan's serpentine tentacles. Even those who once called themselves Aquaman and Aquaman couldn't evade this powerful and swift attack. They were as weak and helpless as two flies on the seafloor being swatted away. Their bodies slammed into the ruins of the seabed. Even with Atlantean royal blood, they were caught off guard by the blow, feeling excruciating pain all over their bodies, barely catching their breath. "What are those?" Arthur patted his dizzy head, staring in horror at the 4 or 5 massive, floating serpentine tentacles on the seabed. "That's..." Meanwhile, Namor, standing next to him, narrowed his eyes slightly and immediately spotted the trident artifact standing not far ahead, before the skull and throne. Namor immediately launched himself, bursting forward like a black ghost. "Look out!" Arthur suddenly lunged forward, colliding directly with a second serpentine tentacle swiping towards Namor. His tall, muscular body seemed insignificant in front of the serpentine tentacle, barely slowing its attack before being pinned back and thrown sideways. Namor seized the opportunity to dodge the serpentine tentacle's attack and continued to rapidly approach the trident, reaching within reach of the artifact. "I am the king of the sea." Namor's eyes reflected the artifact's shimmering golden light. His right hand opened, reaching for the trident before him. However, just before his hand was about to land on the trident, the dark claw that had been holding the trident suddenly released a black, glue-like liquid from its palm. The dark liquid quickly flowed along the trident's shaft, coating the entire trident like an infection. And so, Namor's hand finally fell on the dark protective layer wrapped around the trident artifact. Chapter 157 The final winner of the artifact. It was a strange and terrifying scene. The sacred, shimmering trident seemed infected, losing its original brilliance and power, now coated in a dark, living fluid. "What is this?" Namor was startled. The dark protective layer, laced with countless tiny barbs, burned his bullet-resistant right hand, causing him to retract it in pain. Namor followed the arm extended by the dark fluid and saw the darkened mirror, dozens of meters away, carrying one of the serpentine tentacles. Nian wasn't sure if Namor or Arthur had the potential to convince the artifact to recognize them, so he simply hid the artifact. "I haven't finished trying yet," the darkened Mara said, pushing forward her left hand and the serpentine tentacle on her shoulder, and slipping out from underneath. "You mean you haven't finished trying? I've tried so many times. In thousands of years, the guardian sea beast Karazhan had never seen anyone as shameless as the darkened Mara. Of course, it had never seen anything as powerful as the dark Mara. But no matter what, as the guardian of the artifact, and for the sake of the promise of the god, Karazhan must stop the unworthy invaders. What the hell is happening down there?" Atop the island, Atlanta's face was filled with shock. The island she was on began to shake continuously. Numerous pterosaurs fled in panic, and some land dinosaurs were so frightened that they collapsed to the ground, incontinent. Buzz! At that moment, the Earth's inner sea shook. Beneath the island, the water surged. 4 or 5 snake-like tentacles simultaneously attacked, carrying a terrifying undercurrent and suppressing force, slapping down towards the dark Mara. This was the first time in 1,000 years that Karazhan had taken it seriously. Mara. Namor also rushed towards the dark Mara, wanting to seize the artifact and, by the way, avenge his brother Orm. The dark Mara's eyes suddenly widened. It wasn't Karazhan and Namor's attack directed at her, but right in front of the throne. First, a ray of golden light burst forth from the dark cortex, carrying a powerful force. Then, countless strands of golden light emanated from it. The trident, enveloped in dark fluid, vibrated continuously, suddenly breaking free from the dark claw's grip and flying towards Arthur, who had just struggled to rise from the seabed. Arthur instinctively spread the 5 fingers of his right hand. "That's mine," Namor said coldly, extending his palm forward through the air. The trident paused in the water, positioned between Arthur and Namor, as if making a final choice between the two. They both possessed the potential to be kings. Karazhan sighed inwardly, but the attack continued to fall towards the darkened Mara. All it had to do now was to stop the darkened Mara and allow the artifact to make its final decision. Suddenly, the darkened Mara smiled. A wave of negative anger washed over Nian, and he froze. It was the Mara in his mind, strangely furious. Mara's mind whispered angrily, "Why do they have the potential to be kings, while even if I lead the way and try my best, I can't convince the artifact to recognize me? Mara, don't you understand? It's blood. They carry the blood of the Atlantean royal family." Nian thought, "But it's wonderful that you're angry. A woman who doesn't get angry, who only compromises, can't be an empress." "Nian, what should I do?" Mara asked. "Just trust me," Nian replied with a firm mind. Step. A darkened Mara suddenly took a step forward in the sea. Her eyes burned like a deep blue flame, her crimson hair splayed wildly and domineeringly behind her. It felt like she was stepping on the heart of the hidden sea in the Earth's core. From the base of Mara's foot, like a drop of thick ink spreading through clear water, the black liquid quickly spread, infecting the surrounding sea. 10 meters, 100 meters, 1,000 meters, until it reached a radius of 10,000 meters. Plop. Arthur and Namor, trapped within the black waters, suddenly collapsed to the ground, while Namor dropped to his knees buried deep in the mud. Heavy, unbearable pressure. Yes. Even tens of thousands of meters below, under immense pressure, these two, capable of swimming freely and swiftly, were now crushed by the black water, unable to remain standing. Bang! 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 Not only them, but also the serpentine tentacles within the black waters, sank one by one to the bottom of the sea. Tramp, tramp. The seabed was so quiet that only the dull sound of footsteps could be heard. The blackened Mara, like a graceful and noble tread through the water, approached the trident, which remained afloat. The brilliance of the trident was completely suppressed, dimming, rendering it like an ordinary piece of iron. Black Mara no longer needed to extend her armored hand, landing a second blow on the trident. The trident hummed softly again, as if trying to resist, but held in her grasp, it remained immobile. Even if it's a divine artifact, it's only a weapon. How can you choose your master? Black Mara reprimanded coldly, her eyes filled with disdain. In Nian's eyes, artifacts were nothing special. His aunt had a collection of artifacts, and he'd even obtained a divine arrow, which still sat under the table in her room. He could melt it down and forge a new one. That was just what Nian was thinking. The trident in Black Mara's hand suddenly ceased resistance, instead melting with gentle golden light. The golden light enveloped the dark symbiote suit, transforming into gilded battle armor above. Golden flames danced in Black Mara's beautiful eyes. Circles of golden light, imbued with divine power, radiated outward like golden ripples, marking the blackened Mara, holding the artifact, at the center of the ocean. Countless marine creatures, with memories deep within their bloodlines, witnessed the birth of a new god, ruling the sea. Blackened Mara, clutching the trident artifact and clad in golden armor, her scarlet hair dancing wildly, exuding the majesty and sacred aura of a king. Black matter merged into blackened Mara's form, and the surrounding waters became clear once again. Serpentine tentacles twitched and slowly rose. The blackened Mara asked bluntly, "Do you want to continue fighting?" Karazhan in the dark was silent for a moment, then he sighed. "I didn't expect that after such a long time, a new sea god would be born." "Sea god? What do you mean?" The blackened Mara glanced at the golden trident in her hand and asked curiously, "Didn't it say that whoever gets it will be the king?" "That's right," Karazhan said hoarsely. "If the trident relies on blood to recognize its master, that person will be the future king of the sea." It paused, with a trace of awe and relief, "and if the other party uses non-bloodline methods to eventually gain the recognition of the artifact, that person will be the sea god who rules the ocean." Chapter 158 Poseidon, Nian and Mara. Beneath the islands, the hidden sea lies within the earth's core. The god of the sea. The darkened Mara lowered her gaze, gazing at the trident she held in her hand. She felt as if she could manipulate the waves and tides in her area, communicating with the marine life within, including the trench tribe sea monsters guarding the entrance to the hidden sea. Nian finally understood why whoever possessed the trident became the king of Atlantis. It was true. The trident was worthy of being Atlantis' most precious imperial relic. It was more than just a symbol of power. From the moment it was forged in ancient times, its inherent divine power was inextricably linked to the sea, capable of commanding all creatures within it. Its abilities were nearly identical to those of the legendary Greek god of the sea, Poseidon, which must have been a familiar aspect to Nian. This artifact, supposedly called the Trident of Poseidon, was of the same lineage as the one carried by his aunt Diana, and even the one on Paradise Island. Unfortunately, that's all. Nian is not interested in the title and inheritance of the god of the sea. In a few hours, the blackened Mara, a special existence who has just been certified as the second-generation god of the sea, will completely disappear from this world. Therefore, the god of the sea is still the same as the original gods, and has long been dead in name only. However, with such an official, Karazhan, certification and identity, the next thing to do will be much simpler. "You two, do you still want to continue fighting?" Her beautiful eyes seemed to be burning with golden and sacred flames. The blackened Mara glanced at Arthur and Namor next to her, and pointed the tip of Poseidon's trident with a gleaming golden light. "Surrender, or die." The twins floating in the seabed area fell silent. In front of the glory and halo of the reappearance of the god of the sea, their potential as kings seemed dim, even a kind of powerless sadness. Aquaman Arthur instinctively lowered his head and could not look at the blackened Mara. Because he had the royal blood of Atlantis flowing in his body, he had the urge to surrender and worship at this time. Did Mara become the god of the sea? It seems not bad. At least, there will be no war between the land world and the underwater world. Arthur felt empty in his heart and could only comfort himself with this. A few days ago, Mara was still persuading him to go back and take charge of the kingdom of Atlantis, but now the other party has been directly defied. In the end, is this the result? Namor first murmured to himself in disbelief, then he sighed and knelt on one knee in the sea to salute a blackened Mara. In the heart of the Mediterranean Sea, deep sea. Military advisor Vico arrived here with the Atlantis underwater fleet. A full 100 underwater spaceships in the shape of jellyfish or fish, their metal shells glowing with lights as bright as daylight, orderly surrounded the thundercloud like underwater vortex. The death of Orm angered the royal family and nobles of Atlantis. So Vico was asked to lead the kingdom's most elite underwater fleet to capture the major criminal, Princess Mara of Zabel, who is guilty of both regicide and treason, and bring her back to the country. If necessary, she can be killed on the spot. As a military advisor of a country, Vico really couldn't understand why Princess Mara's temperament changed so drastically in less than half a day, and why she did such an extreme behavior. What exactly happened to Mara? Military advisor, look. Vico, who was sitting on a seahorse, was in a trance when he heard the startled words of the soldiers beside him. Vico looked forward and soon his face showed the same shock. In front of him, accompanied by the dazzling and scorching lightning, like a water snake, the seabed vortex in the center began to expand outward and grow. Swish! 3 figures rushed out of the seabed vortex first. They were 2 men and 1 woman. Arthur, Namor, and the former queen. Vico was shocked and recognized the identities of the 3 at a glance. He immediately flipped off the seahorse and rushed forward. Vico. Atlanta also recognized him, and her pale and tired face finally showed a trace of relief. Greetings, Queen. Vico hurriedly performed a standard etiquette, and then he looked at Arthur and Namor. You are here too. Could it be that the trident artifact has been found? Indeed, it has been found. Namor responded stiffly. Arthur smiled bitterly and said, Vico, now is not the time to reminisce about the past. Let's make way for a while. Make way for who? Vico was stunned for a moment, then he noticed that the whirlpool in the seabed ahead was still expanding. What is that? The soldiers aboard the underwater ship were stunned as they saw an immense beast emerge from the vortex. It was a massive and ferocious sea creature. Larger than any ultra-modern underwater warship, its immense height and length measured over 1,000 meters. Behind it were 7 or 8 snake-like tentacles, each the size of a Boeing aircraft fuselage. Its primitive, ferocious triangular head resembled a dinosaur, and its front claws were capable of severing a large ship in 2. Its mere presence, exposed to the ocean outside, stirred up waves and tidal surges. Compared to the underwater ship, it was like a school of fish against a giant shark. This was the full appearance of the legendary sea beast, Karazhan. Seeing it would fill every underwater dweller with visceral fear. Above Karazhan's head, a stunning red-haired woman stood, wielding a golden trident. An imposing, tangible presence emanated from her. Now that you have seen the god of the sea, why not bow down? Someone has regained the trident and obtained the title of God of the Sea. After thousands of years, the name of God of the Sea has reappeared in the ocean. It's Mera. Princess Mera, who just killed King Orm. This news quickly spread throughout the underwater world. The only 4 remaining civilized countries among the 7 kingdoms were in an uproar. The entire underwater world can be said to have completely exploded. The kingdom of Atlantis, at the prison gate. King Zebul was liberated on the spot. Upon hearing the news, his face was full of disbelief. You must be kidding. The one who obtained the trident artifact is my daughter. This day was destined to be a historic moment in which the underwater world would be transformed and a new era would be ushered in. The darkened Mera stood atop the legendary sea beast Karazhan, wielding the sacred trident as she reigned supreme over the 4 seas and 7 kingdoms. Countless marine creatures followed her wherever she passed, and the waves and tides parted as if on purpose. It was as if she were patrolling her own territory, or perhaps even strolling through her own yard. Thank you, Nian, Mera thought. This is what we've accomplished together. Of course, there's only so much I can do for you. If you want to be a true emperor, you'll face much more in the future. Nian pondered, however, with a sacred trident in hand and Karazhan's help, I believe you can handle all of this. Are you ready to leave? Mera's heart trembled, but she controlled herself not to think any further. Well, the time is almost up, Nian said with remarkable ease. The end of Symbiosis is approaching. Chapter 159, End of Volume 1, Extraordinary People of the Opposite Sexes. Gotham City. Night falls, the lights begin to come on. Even with Batman's presence, crime has improved considerably, but some areas remain untouched. In the alleys of illegal areas where even the local police are reluctant to tread, nightclubs and bars blaze with life. Neon lights flashing in a dazzling display, and intense, high-pitched music rages like a torrent of steel. Tall, burly men and scantily clad women dance wildly in the bars, their faces radiating with ecstasy. Someone thrusts fistfuls of US dollars and red wine into their white breasts, drawing a soft, pleasing laugh from the voluptuous woman. But, at a bar in the bustling nightclub, a young woman with dyed hair tied in twin ponytails sat alone, drinking. Her delicate, fair face was covered in heavy, clown-like makeup, and her slender neck was bruised and bruised. She wore only a black vest jacket that wrapped around her chest, revealing her alluring waist and belly button, emblazoned with playing card patterns. Her pert butt, tucked into red shorts, sat on a high bar stool. Her beauty and figure were top-notch in the bar, and her voluptuous aura drew many glances. However, they were only glances from afar. No one dared approach or even approach. Her long, slender legs, clad in black fishnet stockings, swayed back and forth. The girl, dazed, swirled the wine in her glass and buckled the black cloth strap, reminiscent of a pet collar, back around her neck, concealing the black paw print on the side of her neck. At this moment, a group of men entered the bar through a small door. The burly leader, upon seeing the girl with twin tails, let out a resounding whistle. "Oh my God. Isn't this Gotham's big sister, Harley Quinn? When did she escape from the asylum or prison? I heard you and the Joker broke up. Have you considered me being your new boyfriend?" The burly leader's eyes roamed over the girl's exposed skin, his aggressiveness and possessiveness undisguised. "Sure." Harley put down her goblet. Her lips curled wildly, and she chuckled, puffing out her towering chest. Her crotch, barely covered by her shorts, opened wide, and she uninhibitedly offered one of her slender legs forward. The burly leader's eyes lit up, and heedless of his men's attempts to dissuade him, he quickly stepped forward, his large hands grasping the girl's leg, its white, soft flesh revealed by the fishnet stockings. The moment his hand touched her leg, the burly leader immediately let out a shriek like a butchered pig. He shrank back, feeling the heat, staring at his right finger in horror and dread. It felt as if the fingertips had been pricked by tiny, sharp thorns, and thick drops of blood flowed out. His body convulsed violently. In less than 3 seconds, the nearly 2-meter-tall man collapsed backward, lifeless, his face a horrified expression of agony and terror. Harry ignored the panicked customers fleeing outside. He swirled his glass, took a sip, and muttered, "Black kitten, where's it? Eastern Africa. This is one of the poorest and most underdeveloped regions in the world, sparsely populated. For dozens of kilometers, it's hard to find a decent native village. All that's left is pristine forest, savanna, and endless mountains and valleys. This is a paradise for both wild animals and poachers." Bang! 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 In the dense, pristine forest, several gunshots suddenly rang out, startling the birds in the woods before quickly returning to silence. Beside a blood-soaked bush lay the bodies of several men dressed as poachers. They still clutched loaded hunting rifles. Their chests, necks, and limbs bore mortal wounds from the predator's claws. Clothing, armor, skin, and flesh had been sliced through, exposing internal organs and cadaverous bones. Not far away, a clear stream gurgled. Casting its shadow on the ground in the bright sunlight, one could see the tail, fur, ears, and claws gradually fading. A beautiful young woman came to the stream to clean the blood from her hands. Her permed blonde hair cascaded carelessly over her shoulders. She walked barefoot, tiptoeing with a graceful, cat-like gait. Her tight-fitting dress revealed a voluptuous, mature figure, her elegant and refined aura at odds with the surroundings. "It should be around here, Wakanda." Leopard Barber licked the stream water in her hands, a hint of resentment and determination on her beautiful face. "Diana, just wait. I'll return when I'm stronger and will definitely steal your prey again. That child, I'm determined to eat you." Los Angeles. Bustling downtown, atop a skyscraper. A former biotechnology development company, now the base of the Fantastic Four. The new superhero team, the Fantastic Four, is growing in fame in the city. On weekdays, they conduct biotechnology research. When needed, they transform into the Fantastic Four and deal with various extraordinary events in the local city. Ring, ring, ring. The office bell rang. A young woman, barely biting a piece of freshly baked bread, quickly stepped inside in her high heels. She was a model urban office worker with short hair, dressed in a perfectly tailored white skirt suit. Her beautiful face and model figure combined to create an intellectual and beautiful look. The woman picked up the phone and said gently, "Hello, this is Fantastic Four Studios. I'm the manager, Susan." "Really? Are you sure there's no such person? There's no boy named Max Eisenhart or girl named Polaris in Los Angeles?" "Okay, I got it." Invisible Woman Susan hung up the phone, then clenched her fist slightly and took a big bite of the bread in her hand. "Is everything fabricated? Don't think I can't find them just because of this." Washington. High school building, teacher's office. "Yes, all the students and parents, including our school counselor and driver, are safe." "Yes, who could have known such a huge wave disaster would suddenly occur?" Thanks to the timely rescue of Wonder Woman and Spider-Woman. Assistant instructor Felicia Hardy sat in her office chair, answering calls from all directions. "Yes, the last missing student, Nian Prince, has also been found. He accidentally washed up on the beach near the town, but he's safe." Finally, she hung up. Felicia let out a long breath and leaned back in her chair. Her white shirt, bulging dramatically, nearly ripped a button from its front. Her surprisingly smooth, white hair cascaded down her back, gleaming in the sunlight streaming through the window. Since no one else was in the office, Felicia instinctively lifted her delicate black sock-covered foot and, like a cat, tapped the corner of her desk. The chair she was sitting in suddenly spun, sending her snow-white hair flying with it. "It's a good thing you're okay," Felicia whispered to herself. She closed her eyes, her thick, trembling eyelashes taking on a strange silvery hue. Chapter 160, the end of Volume 2, Extraordinary People of the Opposite Sexes. New York. At a car wash near the suburbs, men and women dressed in unconventional attire gathered outdoors, enjoying beer and fried chicken. Sports cars and guns were casually parked nearby. Among them was the youngest, a green-haired girl with a mature-looking face, heavy makeup, and a lollipop in her mouth. Her small, youthful figure, overly flat-chested, was dressed in a long-sleeved sports top and crop pants, giving her a dashing, commanding presence. With her hands in her pockets, she quietly leaned against a car, her eyes narrowed slightly as she gazed at the crowd gathered for the end-of-month dinner in the open air, basking in the brilliant sunshine. "Boss, want some?" someone shouted, raising their beer. Lorna shook her head. You're underage, boss. Right? I don't think I've seen boss smoke lately." The men at the dinner laughed and chatted, the atmosphere harmonious and lively. Suddenly, Lorna spoke. "From today on, our gang is disbanded." As soon as the words fell, regardless of whether they were eating fried chicken or drinking beer, everyone at the gathering paused, looking at each other in bewilderment. Their faces were filled with surprise, some even thinking they had misheard. There was a silence of about 3 seconds. One of the men, trying to lighten the mood, chuckled, "It's almost April Fool's Day, boss. You're just joking with us. But this joke's a bit unkind." Yeah, many echoed, feigning laughter. But their voices grew quieter. The girl was just watching them silently. Lorna whispered, "I'm not kidding. You should know that what I say is true. From now on, our gang is disbanded right here, right here." Knowing that any decision Lorna made was final, everyone fell silent again. "Why is that, boss?" someone asked, a sob in their voice. "No particular reason." Lorna crossed her arms and casually said, "If you need a reason, I want to go to school. Does that count?" "What?" The men were completely stunned. The New York gang boss is going to school? However, it wasn't until then that they realized, at the boss's age, he should indeed be in school. It was just because she was so powerful that everyone unconsciously overlooked this fact. Camartage. Swish. A portal formed by swirling sparks appeared in the main hall, revealing a red-haired girl, still wearing her school uniform skirt. Her small hands grasped the hem of her skirt, and her white-socked feet lightly stepped through the other end of the portal. "It's not a weekend, what brings you here?" As if foreseeing this, a bald woman in a yellow robe walked from the corridor into the main hall, looking at the crimson girl who had expertly entered through the portal. "Master Ancient One." Wanda saluted the woman with her skirt raised in a standard manner. Her doll-like face was filled with determination, and she said crisply, "Please, teach me more spells." Why do you suddenly want to learn spells so badly?" The Ancient One looked at her calmly. Wanda took a deep breath, her jewel-like eyes gleaming. She spoke bluntly, "I'm too weak. I've always been protected by that person, and I'm completely useless in some matters, so I want to become stronger, to become that person's strength." Gotham City. Justice League Headquarters. Formerly an abandoned church building, it has been transformed after receiving investment. A large round table in the center holds 6 chairs. It's majestic, sacred, and peaceful, like a pure place far from the world. "What did you say?" "Diana, you're quitting the Justice League." Batman Wayne Bruce stared in disbelief at the tall, beautiful, dark-haired woman standing before him. "The Justice League started with just you and me, then gradually recruited members, worked together to save Superman and resolve the Steppenwolf incident, and now that we've finally built our headquarters, you, one of the oldest heroes, are leaving." "Not really." Diana looked up at the Justice League's totem and whispered, "Just a temporary, long vacation. Lately, I've been so busy founding the Justice League that I haven't had much time to spend with the kids." Bruce couldn't help but ask, is caring for the kids more important than saving the world? Who says caring for the kids doesn't mean saving the world at the same time? Diana smiled. Besides, don't you have the Justice League and the world under your care? Bruce was speechless. 10,000 meters beneath the sea, Atlantis. The royal palace. As a female figure ascended the sacred steps, the royal nobles of the 4 nations on either side knelt in salute. Among them was Atlantis' family, mother and son. Just like the previous fantasy, the previous part. A golden crown with a crown of beads crowned Mara's long, wafted red hair. Her beautiful face was serene and serene, her graceful form draped in ornate golden armor. In her right hand, she clutched a gleaming golden trident, radiating a dazzling light, a surging wave, and an imperial aura. Nian, we succeeded, Mara instinctively spoke in her mind, just as she had the day before. But soon, Mara realized she was no longer in a symbiotic state. The human boy had returned to the terrestrial world. From then on, she would continue the journey alone. Mara bit her lower lip gently, embodying the glory and nobility of the underwater world, as she sauntered towards the throne ahead. School, classroom. The black-haired boy had fallen asleep on his desk. He had a dream. A very long dream, in which he encountered many extraordinary beings of the opposite sex. In a daze, familiar voices called out from different girls on either side of his ears, one crisp and clear, the other soft and gentle, like a blessing to both ears. Nian, school's over. Senior, I'm going clothes shopping. Huh? Nian slowly opened his sleepy eyes and looked up to see 2 beautiful girls standing on either side of his seat, hunched over. So, it wasn't a dream, Nian muttered to himself. Oh no. Could this be the after effects of that deep-sea dive the day before yesterday? Gwen's face was filled with worry. She reached out and touched both Nian and her own forehead, muttering, no fever either. Senior, I checked before, and Senior Nian is in good health. Kara blinked. Besides, don't you have a spider constitution? How could your body temperature be the same as a normal person's? What? Truth be told. Okay. Watching the 2 engage in their usual bickering, Nian finally sobered up. Yawning, he quickly stood up and said, let's go. Aren't you guys going to the clothing store to look at some clothes? Yes. Kara and Gwen exchanged a glance and paused, their anger still lingering, as if they'd postponed the fight. Clearly, they'd both prepared their own attacks, waiting for the weekend. Nian shuddered for no apparent reason. It looked like a bad weekend for travel. Chapter 161 Teacher, please listen to my explanation. Washington. Inside a large clothing store not far from the school, Nian quietly found a chair in the corner before the changing rooms. He yawned sleepily, then patiently waited, backpack in hand. Coincidentally, a screen built into the wall of the clothing store began playing a news report about the massive waves that had struck coastlines around the world a few days earlier. This sudden, once-in-a-millennium wave disaster caused many local casualties, severe damage to buildings and the economy. Some coastal towns suffered as much as 90% damage, with more than 1 million people directly affected. Mountains of marine debris and ships were washed ashore by the waves. On the day of the incident, a high school in Washington was organizing students to visit a marine museum in a coastal town. Fortunately, Wonder Woman and Spider Woman happened to pass by the scene and rescued all the students in time, creating the only miracle of 0 casualties in this natural disaster. It can be said that they were blessed by God. It is worth mentioning that during the Battle of New York a few months ago, this group of high school students were also at the scene and survived by chance. Now, let's interview the instructor who works at this school. He has personally experienced the Battle of New York and the huge wave disaster, and achieved the miracle of no casualties among students. He is Roth Harrington. A sturdy, macho man appeared on the TV screen, waving and speaking nervously. Hello everyone, I'm Roth Harrington. You can call me Instructor Roth or Teacher Harrington. Here, I'd like to thank the silver-haired superhero goddess. She gave me courage and responsibility. In a special news report, Nian's school was even featured. Is this the end? Nian's mouth twitched. He closed his eyes and leaned back on the sofa in the clothing store. Today was Thursday. 2 days had passed since he'd encountered the giant wave at the seaside and resolved the conflict in the underwater world. Even after 2 days, Nian still felt a little tired and sleepy, so he accidentally fell asleep during class this afternoon and didn't even realize it was dismissed. Suddenly, a familiar, pleasant female voice came from the side. Student Nian. Zinnian looked in the direction of the voice and exclaimed in surprise, "Teacher. Wasn't that Deputy Instructor Felicia?" However, she was now dressed like a sales assistant in a clothing store. Her patterned orange t-shirt, a staff top, was stretched to its full height. Her waist-length silver hair was tied into a ponytail, giving her a younger, more vibrant look than her usual teacher's attire. She looked as pretty and capable as a college student. And Felicia, still in her internship, was a college student. "Teacher, why are you here?" "Nian, why are you here?" Nian and Felicia asked in unison. The encounter suddenly felt awkward. Felicia adjusted her newly changed top, turned slightly away, and casually said, "This shop belongs to my relative. School's over, so I came to check it out for her." "I see," Nian nodded. "What about you?" Felicia looked at Nian curiously. "Of course I'm here to buy clothes," Nian shrugged, matter-of-factly. "Buying clothes, are you sure?" Felicia's eyes grew strange, and she warned, "This shop is for women only. Men are not allowed to enter." "Oh." Nian quickly glanced around, noticing that the shop indeed only held women's clothing. "Teacher, let me explain." Nian hadn't finished his words when the door to a private changing room suddenly opened. "Nian, can you help me take a look at this swimsuit?" The short-haired girl bravely flung it open and asked quickly. This brought her face to face with Nian and Felicia, who were standing next to her. Gwen, her childhood sweetheart, was wearing a sky blue swimsuit. The style was overly conservative, with a tight-fitting top that almost completely covered her upper body, revealing no skin at all. From her neck to her tummy, from her shoulders to her wrists, it outlined her slender, well-developed figure. Her rounded curves were particularly striking. If it weren't for the constricting top, she might have rivaled Felicia's. "My good friend has been developing quite well lately." Nian sighed inwardly, realizing he'd only grown 5 centimeters in comparison, a subtle change. Continuing down, she reached the matching sky blue swimskirt. The material was thinner than the top, allowing a glimpse of the underskirt beneath. Even knowing it was a base layer, the subtle illusion of revealing it still made one want to applaud the swimsuit's design. So understanding. Gwen's slender, even, white legs were fully exposed, starting from her thighs, slightly crossed in overlap with a hint of nervousness, all the way down to her small, sandal-clad feet, their curved, shimmering curves. "Not bad," Nian complimented subconsciously, but he quickly realized now wasn't the time for criticism. "Teacher." Gwen noticed Felicia beside Nian, her exposed skin immediately turning a warming pink. A faint hint of heat rose from her head, and with a snap, she quickly closed the door. "So, you're here with your girlfriend shopping for clothes? Well, at this age, teachers go through the same thing. No need to explain, I totally understand." Felicia feigned composure, demonstrating her maturity as a teacher. "Teacher, I think you should listen to my explanation." Nian chuckled bitterly. Before he could finish his words, the door to the adjacent changing room swung open with a snap. "Senior, do you like this?" the blonde girl asked Nian sweetly and playfully. Kara had also changed into a swimsuit, a stark contrast to Gwen's more conservative outfit. It was a black bikini. Her hair, a dark gold in the room, fell back in disarray. The girl's most important parts were barely concealed by the black fabric, revealing her fair, smooth skin. From her delicate face to her delicate, pink feet, Nian marveled that this was truly a masterpiece from Krypton. The girl's body, with a hint of youthful elegance and a distinct contrast between fabric and skin, was undoubtedly a top-notch visual experience. Nian couldn't help but want to give a thumbs up. However, seeing Kara's eyes with a hint of cunning and playfulness, Nian suddenly realized that this guy must have walked out on purpose. Otherwise, with her super hearing and X-ray vision, there was no reason why she wouldn't have noticed the presence of other people outside. Noticing that Felicia reached out to touch the phone in her trouser pocket, Nian quickly closed the door of the locker room where Kara was and shouted, "Teacher, listen to my explanation." Chapter 162 Be My Girlfriend. "Teacher, please listen to my explanation." "Nian, you've explained it clearly." "Ah. But I just didn't say anything, teacher." After Nian chased Felicia out of the locker area, the 2 doors of the locker room opened simultaneously. Gwen covered her red face with her hands in shame, while Kara couldn't help but smile as she emerged. "Kara, that joke is a bit too much," Gwen said worriedly. "I believe Senior Nian can handle it," Kara said baffledly. "If he can't even handle this, He'll have a lot more trouble later. What do you mean? Gwen glanced at her curiously. Nothing. Kara shook her head, as if remembering something. By the way, thank you. She handed a bag of clothes to Gwen. This is for you, as a thank you gift. Wait? What are you thanking me for? Gwen looked down at the so-called thank you gift, a puzzled look on her face. Kara responded, thank you for giving me Saturday. No, I'm the one who's embarrassed. Gwen quickly waved her hand. Originally, I didn't know my birthday was Sunday, so I made an appointment with Nian for Saturday. Now you're insisting on changing your original appointment. But you could have taken 2 days off, your entire weekend. Kara chuckled, gesturing at her thank you gift. This is like my early birthday present to you. Take it. Okay then. Gwen hesitated, then took the gift bag from Kara and said sincerely, thank you. You're welcome. Don't give in. We're competitors. Kara's eyes sparkled, her face brimming with confidence and fighting spirit. Of course. I can give up everything else, but I'm not going to give up this one, Gwen replied firmly. On the way home, Nian was dejected, accompanied by Gwen and Kara, who had already bought their own clothes. Nian, have you explained it clearly? Gwen whispered, her cheeks still burning as she recalled the previous scene. Tentatively, barely, I've explained it clearly, Nian could only reply. Don't worry, Teacher Felicia is an adult, she'll definitely understand, Kara assured him. What do you mean by understanding? It's you. Nian turned back in anger and tapped Kara's smooth forehead with a finger. Ugh, senior, you're bullying me, Kara cried out in pain, clutching her forehead. Nian replied, haha, I don't believe you. Kryptonians have bodies of steel. Well, they say they have bodies of steel, but they're actually supposed to be harder than the hardest metal in the world. Let's say goodbye here. The three returning home reached an intersection. Nian headed for the residential complex directly ahead, Gwen went to the adjacent residential complex, and Kara walked into a deserted alley nearby. A moment later, a faint sound of breaking the sound barrier echoed from the sky above the city. A figure, as swift as an airplane and as tiny as a bullet, vanished into the distance. Nian looked up at the breaking clouds and suddenly recalled 2 days ago. When the Dark Mara, the symbiotic union of Nian and Mara, arrived at the Fisherman Kingdom with the Karazhan to threaten them, the seafaring nobles kept shouting God's messenger, as if calling for a powerful being to confront them. Then, a girl, wearing her usual Supergirl uniform and a red cape, emerged with a shark-like creature with arms and legs. Yes. That day, Supergirl Kara and Shark King Nanavi, who had mistakenly stumbled into the underwater Fisherman Kingdom, were both considered divine messengers by the local nation due to Kara's punch creating the abyss and Nanavi's unique shark appearance. Ultimately, it was only through a trick played by the Dark Mara and Supergirl Kara that they managed to deceive the Fisherman Kingdom nobles. It was then that Kara performed a so-called physical examination and X-ray on him. Horizontal ellipsis. I'm back, Nian opened the door and habitually called out to the house. Unexpectedly, a pleasant and gentle response came from inside the house. Welcome back, Nian, who was standing at the door, was slightly stunned and paused. He followed his gaze. A tall and beautiful female figure walked towards him. The black-haired woman took out slippers from the shoe cabinet with great familiarity, squatted slightly, revealing her graceful and mature figure. The back of her neck to her lower hips drew a perfect arc again, and she casually placed the slippers on the carpet at the door in front of him. Even the act of putting the shoes down seemed elegant and noble. Just like before. Nothing special. What touched Nian deeply was that since his aunt got involved in the Justice League, she basically went out early and came back late. The scene before him had not happened for a long time. Everyone says I'm not a child anymore. Nian was in a trance for a moment, handed his school bag to his aunt, and put on his shoes himself. Did you say that? Diana blinked, the corners of her mouth raised slightly, and she smiled faintly, saying, for you thousands and thousands of times. Looking at the woman in front of him, Nian's heart was pounding. Or rather, who wouldn't be moved? Diana looked at Nian and said softly, you've been doing very well recently. You've handled your studies and supernatural events very well, unlike me, who was busy with the Justice League and neglected to take care of you. The more you say it, the more like a child I feel. Nian smiled, and suddenly an idea came to his mind, and he said casually, then is there a reward? Or compensation is fine? Children should also have candy. Of course. Diana opened her lips slightly. Whatever you want, I will reward you. Anything is fine. Nian subconsciously looked at the bright and soft lips with a perfect curve. Diana turned and walked toward the main hall. With her back to Nian, she said, as long as it's not too extreme, it's fine. Then, he clenched his fists tightly, staring at his aunt's back. He felt as if bound by a lasso of truth. Following his heart, he said, be my girlfriend. Diana shuddered, frozen in the main hall like a statue of a deity, not turning back. Sure enough, he was a little too impatient. Nian sighed inwardly and said quickly, one day, no, half a day will be enough. Diana continued to stand there and whispered, why do you want to do this? Nian thought for a while and said, I have never been in a relationship, but recently I want to get to know it well. By the way, this is practice about love. Really? Since it's practice, there's nothing I can do. Diana seemed to be trying to convince herself. She reached out and smoothed the wet strands of hair on her face. She still didn't turn around and continued to say with her back to Nian, only half a day, time. Tomorrow, Friday after school. Nian quickly followed up, fearing that Aunt Diana would suddenly change her mind. That's it. Diana nodded calmly, but before she could take a step, Nian said from behind, and, can you advance me some pocket money? 500 is about right. What are you going to do? Diana asked instinctively with curiosity. Take your girlfriend out for dinner tomorrow night. It's not possible for her to pay for the first date. Nian smiled as he walked past Diana, saying to himself, to be honest, I'm a little nervous. This is the first time I've taken the initiative to ask a girl out on a date. And, do you have any good suggestions? No. Diana's lips curled up slightly, and she warned with a slightly stern face, but, taking a girl out on a date, 500 is not enough. I'll give you 10,000. She paused and said, tomorrow night, behave yourself. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Things My Aunt is Not Skilled With. The next day, Friday afternoon, the bell rang. A throng of students filed out of the school building, and for the first time, the dark-haired boy was the first to run out. Nian's movements and speed were so rapid that even the superhuman Gwen and Kara barely reacted. Luckily, Nian had already told them he was going gift shopping that evening, so he wouldn't be going home with them. Nian left school and first visited a regular clothing store. He quickly returned home, his backpack bulging. I'm back. Pushing the door open, Nian suppressed his excitement and exclaimed as usual. Welcome back, Diana, having finished get off work early, was waiting on the living room sofa. Her shiny black hair was neatly tied up in a smart bun. She wore her usual stylish white shirt and black trousers, her long, well-proportioned legs pressed against each other. Although she responded to Nian, she didn't step forward to remove her slippers and take her school bag as usual. Instead, she continued to sit elegantly on the sofa, reading, her exquisitely beautiful profile against the backlight. Seeing Nian standing at the doorway, a bit stunned, Diana's expression remained calm. Didn't you say yesterday that it would start after school? So you're already getting into the role, auntie? Nian sighed. He closed the door behind him and, as he stepped onto the carpet to change into his slippers, he couldn't help but mutter, so, if it's a girlfriend, there's no welcoming service. Personally, I think a girlfriend should give the man more opportunities to show off. Diana, flipping through the book, replied without looking up. Like before, it's more like something a married wife would do. As if sensing something, she paused, then calmly closed the book and promptly changed the subject, asking, didn't you say you were going out for dinner? When are you leaving? In both her expression and tone, Diana was remarkably calm and elegant, as if she wasn't the least bit nervous about the situation. So natural. For a moment, Nian mistakenly believed that Diana had truly been his girlfriend, as if she had always been. Was he right to say she was his aunt? No matter what she faced, she handled it with composure and composure. He wasn't going to hold back. Before you leave, Nian took a deep breath, strode towards Diana, and pulled a shopping bag filled with clothes from his backpack. Please make sure you change into this. What is this? Diana looked at the shopping bag Nian handed her, her beautiful eyes flashing with an unexpected glint. And, are you done changing? Nian asked, knocking gently at the door. There was no response from inside. If we don't leave now, Wanda will be home soon, Nian said warmly. Silence fell again for a few seconds, and then the door opened slightly. Are you really going to go out in that outfit? Diana asked, shielding herself with the door, her tone far less calm than before. Of course, I'm all changed, Nian gestured at his new clothes. All right then, Diana bit her lip and continued closing the door. This time, in less than 10 seconds, the door swung open completely, and the demigod emerged, somewhat uncomfortably. Nian's eyes suddenly lit up. His aunt had changed into his new outfit. The top was a pure white t-shirt with a Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse cartoon design on the front, paired with the matching cropped trousers. This outfit, combined with Nian's black t-shirt with a Mickey Mouse and Mickey Mouse cartoon design, looked like a perfect couple's outfit. Diana's expression was awkward. One hand covered her chest with a cartoon design, and with the other, she nervously tugged at the hem of her t-shirt. Perhaps because it was a couple's outfit, the design was geared towards young students, so the woman's dress was a little small. Diana had a typical model figure, so when she put on the top, the white t-shirt couldn't cover her entire waist, revealing a hint of her flawless figure and the delicate curve of her collarbone, as if it were a work of art. As for the leggings, they seemed to have become cropped, revealing a small section of slender, smooth, white legs. Nian's gaze lingered for a moment on the small, alluring navel in the middle. Don't look, Diana said in a rare flustered tone, covering her stomach with a hand, a touch of shame. Auntie, you're used to wearing the armor and skirts you wear in battle, so this outfit is at least more natural, right? Nian's eyes lit up, as if he had discovered a new world. He hadn't expected his almost all-knowing aunt to be so bad at wearing these couples' outfits. This one is different from that one. Diana gritted her teeth, then glared at Nian's smug look, but finally calmed down and lowered her hands. Wait a minute. Nian noticed something, walked around behind Diana, and untied her hair tie. Her black hair suddenly flowed freely, draping casually and naturally over Diana's shoulders. A flicker of surprise flashed in Nian's eyes. At this moment, my aunt's demeanor was different from her usual intellectual and elegant demeanor. Instead, she exuded a youthful, beautiful girlish charm, blending with the maturity of countless years. Isn't this the ideal wealthy woman? Are you satisfied with this? Diana reached out and smoothed out the wrinkles on his clothes. Almost done, time to go, Nian nodded. However, just as Diana and Nian arrived at the door, changing their shoes and preparing to leave, the front door clicked open as someone unlocked it from the outside. With only 3 people home, it was obvious who had returned. Diana and Nian exchanged a silent glance, a hint of panic in both eyes, as if they were facing a formidable enemy. The red-haired girl pushed open the door. Wanda gazed into the deserted, empty living room, tilting her head curiously, whispering to herself, young master and Miss Diana, neither of them has returned. What's this? Wanda quickly noticed something unusual, 2 pairs of slippers, slightly messy, lying on the carpet by the door, not in the shoe cabinet. Whoosh, a slightly chilly night breeze poured in through the open balcony door, lifting the gauze curtains on either side that hadn't been drawn yet. This family is far more wonderful than the universe. In a glass jar in the corner of the balcony, the starfish jar Luo opened its eyes, then quickly closed them again. It was too much to bear to watch. Meanwhile, downstairs in the residential complex, in a corner of the street with no cameras, Diana appeared, holding Nian, and both breathed a sigh of shock. This was far more terrifying than dealing with Steppenwolf. After all, they were wearing matching outfits. If Wanda saw them when she opened the door, the consequences, unthinkable. Nian understood the reasoning. But why did it feel like they were having an affair? Chapter 164 A Date with Wonder Woman. That night, Washington's bustling downtown began to show its usual vibrant energy. The central pedestrian mall was bustling with traffic, and vibrant neon lights shone everywhere, casting a halo of light. On the bustling pedestrian street, Nian and Diana walked side by side. Despite wearing matching outfits, there was a subtle sense of awkwardness between them. Firstly, they were only a couple for a short while, and hadn't yet adjusted to their normal lives. Secondly, there was the size difference. This was a point that no matter how hard one tried to overcome it, It couldn't be overcome or ignored. After all, even though Diana wore a white matching cartoon t-shirt, looking like a recent college graduate, her tall, beautiful figure and the aura she commanded from a few meters away couldn't be altered or concealed. Although Nian had grown to 1.75 meters in recent months, not considered short for a teenager, he still seemed a head shorter than Diana when walking next to her, exuding the usual sunny demeanor of a student. As if sensing Nian's distress, Diana paused, then softly asked, "What do lovers do? What do lovers do?" Nian paused, then quickly came to his senses. Why bother with all that nonsense now? Isn't it enough to just do what lovers love? Nian extended his right hand and gently grasped the woman's soft, jade-like left hand. Diana's thick eyelashes fluttered slightly. Far from resisting, she extended her slender, crystal-clear fingers, allowing the boy's slightly larger palm to envelop and hold them. Their fingers interlocked, their palms clenched in warmth. It was just hand-holding, but the subtle awkwardness between them instantly dissipated. "Let's have dinner first." Nian's face regained its confidence. He had done a lot of research for this evening, even researching 100 things couples should do and some dining etiquette. The two walked into a steakhouse. With a slight awkwardness, Nian pulled out a chair for his aunt, tied a napkin on it, and, after the steaks were served, he first cut a lady's portion. It started off okay. But, why is steak harder to cut than expected? A thought quickly crossed Nian's mind. His aunt always cut a meat for him, whether at home or out, with such skillful grace that it seemed effortless. Oh, I almost forgot, his aunt is Wonder Woman. Nian's mouth twitched. Diana, sitting across from him, observed Nian's clumsy carving and instinctively passed him a plate of steak she had cut without him noticing. Nian was speechless, looking at the stark difference between the two plates. A meal failure. The meal was over. Leaving the steakhouse, Diana reflected seriously, "Okay, my fault. I forgot to give you more opportunities to perform." "No problem," Nian said nonchalantly. "If there aren't any opportunities, then create them. I'll learn a couples game online. For example, and, close your eyes and let me lead you across the road. It's a real test of trust." Nian stopped mid-sentence. He imagined it in his mind. If a car were to hit them at speed, he'd most likely be sent flying, while my aunt would remain standing. The car would fly. This game is quite challenging, trust me. What the hell? My studies were a failure, and I failed the game. Fact proves it. Having a girlfriend who's too good, and even a spirit, isn't always a good thing. Nian and his aunt continued walking down the pedestrian street when they suddenly heard music from a street performer playing the violin. "And, wait here for me." Nian trotted over to the performer and pulled out a $100 bill. The performer looked puzzled at first, then nodded and took the money. Watching Nian return, Diana asked curiously, "What did you say to him?" "Nothing. I just requested a song," Nian said. Then why was he confused? Diana was puzzled, but then realization dawned on her. The violin music began playing, a familiar melody, a Christmas carol. It was only March, more than 6 months before Christmas. Pedestrians on the surrounding streets paused briefly, similarly bewildered, then quickly lost themselves in the cheerful violin music. "Let's go," Nian said, taking Diana's hand. Diana smiled and nodded. No one knew. This song held another meaning for Nian and Diana. They had met on Christmas Eve 17 years before. Seeing a vanilla ice cream stand on the pedestrian street, Nian bought one without hesitation. "It's not so nice to buy one when you're out with a girl," Diana whispered, but then she saw a couple nearby enjoying their unusual way of enjoying it, and realized her mistake. "You try it first," Nian said, holding up the vanilla ice cream. Facing his expectant gaze, Diana hesitated, then tucked her hair into her hand and lowered her head slightly. Her soft, sensual lips parted slightly, and her delicate, pink tongue extended, gently licking the ice cream. The tip of her tongue curled around a faint hint of milky white, the movement graceful and sensual. Then, with a touch of sweetness, her tongue withdrew. Only then did Nian start eating his ice cream with a satisfied look on his face. "Where did you learn that?" Diana glared at him angrily. "I won't tell you." Nian blinked, feeling that he had finally won back a little. Sure enough, my aunt still had many areas where she wasn't proficient and needed to be developed slowly. "You Diana was about to say something when a male voice came from behind her. "Miss Prince." Nian and Diana turned around immediately. It was a middle-aged man in his 40s, dressed in a suit and tie, looking like he had just got off work. Upon seeing Diana's face, the middle-aged man exclaimed with both surprise and delight, "Miss Prince, I didn't expect it was really you." "Mr. Upton, are you still working at the museum?" Diana asked, while addressing Nian. "He was a colleague of mine back when I worked there." Upton agonized, "Yes, without you, Miss Diana, my human encyclopedia, my workload has increased dramatically. By the way, who is this?" Upton's gaze fell on the young man beside Diana, noticing their linked hands and a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. Nian's expression froze. It was like when Diana had brought him back to Paradise Island, unsure how to introduce himself. However, his relationship with his aunt was only pretend, like a game of house, a half-day couple practice session. So, there was no reason to hesitate. In order to avoid future trouble, his current self-introduction should be "Hello, Mr. Upton." Nian took the initiative to extend his hand, and suddenly changed his words and said firmly, "My name is Nian, and I'm Diana's boyfriend." "So it's, huh? What did you say?" Upton was suddenly stunned. Looking at the serious-looking black-haired boy, Upton smiled, looked at Diana in realization and said, "This is your relative, right?" "What a joke." Diana shook her head. She took Nian's hand and placed it on her waist, and said calmly and seriously, "Upton, he's not joking. At the beginning of the month, please support me with monthly tickets!" Exclamation mark. Chapter 165. The moon is so beautiful today. It was late at night in Washington, D.C., far from the bustling downtown core, within the relatively quiet Riverview Park. Only a few streetlights flared a gentle white glow. Many other areas, such as the small woods separated from the public recreational facilities, were completely shrouded in darkness. It was so quiet that the faint chirping of frogs and insects could be heard. The moon in the city sky silently cast its bright silver light. A man and woman, hand in hand, slipped into the grove. "Nian, why did you bring me here?" The dark-haired woman's usually calm and composed face finally betrayed a hint of unease. Her beautiful eyes gazed suspiciously at the boy beside her. "This kid, can't he be so bold? I haven't noticed him for a few days, and he's already learned bad habits so quickly. Why are you here?" "To do what you love, of course." Nian chuckled. "Aren't we a couple?" Diana frowned slightly, her tone a little colder. "I told you not to do anything too extreme. Besides, it's not good for your health after all. We're here." Nian suddenly called out, letting go of Diana's hand and walking forward. Diana was slightly startled as Nian led her through the park's woods to a massive tree in the center. The tree looked nearly 100 years old, its sturdy trunk so thick it could be hugged by 3 people. Its lush, umbrella-like branches and leaves spread upward, while its intertwined roots penetrated deep into the earth. "I saw this online yesterday," Nian said, turning back and winking. "Couples can find an old tree, bury the secrets they want to share, and then return to the tree together 10 years later to retrieve them." As he spoke, Nian pulled out a small glass bottle, a piece of paper, and a pen from his pocket. "So, you brought me here for this." Diana's cheeks flushed slightly, though thankfully, the darkness and the shade of the trees made it difficult to see clearly. "What did you think I was going to do?" Nian asked curiously. "Nothing, let's get started." Diana unnaturally changed the subject, taking the note and pen from Nian's hands. "Don't peek at each other's writing," Nian whispered. He placed the note on his palm and, under the moonlight, scribbled a few lines of English. The cool night breeze from the riverbank blew past, casting a beautiful, tranquil light on the woods. "I'm done," Diana suddenly said. "I'm done too." Nian put the pen away, folded the note in his hand, and placed it in the glass bottle first, motioning to Diana. Diana folded her own note and placed it in the glass bottle, stacking it with Nian's. "Next? Just bury it." Nian rolled up his sleeves and immediately tried to find a spot to dig a hole. But before he could start, he had to do anything. With a single, resounding swish, accompanied by the resounding, metallic twang of a sword, a sharp, ancient sacred sword plunged into the tree's base. The blade was almost completely buried in the earth, with only the pattern hilt slightly exposed, resembling the sword in the stone from Western legends. "This." Nian paused. "I think it should be buried deeper." Diana, with a serious expression, as if she were battling doomsday, stepped forward and effortlessly pulled out the sword of fire. The silver artifact vanished behind her in a flash. All right. Nian looked at the deep hole in the ground, his eyes twitching slightly. He placed the glass bottle in its place and covered it back with soil. After completing this, Nian and Diana stood side by side in front of the tree. Is that all? Diana asked softly. Yes, Nian nodded. Then let's come back together 10 years from now. Diana's beautiful eyes met Nian's. Nian shook his head, bafflingly saying, not 10 years from now. What? Diana paused. 100 years from now, the young man said casually, his smile radiant. Let's come here together again in 100 years. Diana's body and soul trembled. That's right. The difference between them had never been size. It was age. Not to mention 100 years. Even 1,000, 10,000 years from now, Diana, a demigod, would still be as youthful and beautiful as she is now. Nian was, after all, only human. His years, even his entire life, might be but a fleeting moment to Diana. Diana. 100 years from now, no matter what, I will come here. Nian firmly grasped Diana's hand, addressing her by her first name for the first time. Okay, I'll remember that, Diana replied, shaking the young man's hand in return, her gaze meeting his, and her words filled with earnestness. This was a century-long agreement between an immortal demigod and an ordinary human. Nian had never wanted more powerful than now, to acquire more extraordinary abilities. Especially, abilities that could extend lifespan. It wasn't for himself, but to be able to stay with a woman beside him longer. But extending one's own lifespan was no simple matter. So, Nian left behind a time capsule of a note about the future. If he failed, it would at least allow Aunt Diana to survive until 100 years from now. Of course. If there was still a glimmer of hope, Nian would crawl out of hell to keep his appointment, even if he became a ghost. This was his resolve and his backup plan. Diana glanced sideways, watching the young man tightly grasp her hand. After 17 years of living together, even without the lasso of truth, Diana could vaguely guess Nian's motive. This child, truly, just as strong-willed as she was. Diana shook her head slightly, a hint of smile playing at the corner of her mouth. She had already made her decision. If she lost him in this world, let alone 100 years from now, she wouldn't be able to endure even a single day. Without you, this world would be meaningless. She emerged from the woods onto the gravel road. Nian looked at his Aunt Diana beside him. The moonlight shone like a thin silver veil, cascading down through the woman's scattered black hair. Her rosy, alluring lips, in particular, seemed coated in a shimmering moonlight. The moonlight is beautiful today, Nian praised. Diana, without hesitation, gracefully lowered herself, her soft, rosy fragrance, like the delicate scent of violet, landing on the corner of the young man's mouth. That's enough. Any more, and you'll transform. Diana's kiss was swift, her expression unchanged as she withdrew. I haven't said anything yet, Nian muttered, reaching out to touch the corner of his mouth, feeling rather satisfied. The two continued walking along the gravel path out of the park. Then, from a grove in the park, a woman's cry for help mingled with the angry, swearing voice of a man. Nian frowned. This woman's voice sounded terribly familiar. Someone he knew. Without giving Nian time to think, Aunt Diana's figure flashed beside her, her black hair dancing wildly in the wind, and she rushed over there at a speed far beyond that of humans. Chapter 166 The Teacher Who Died. Deep in the park's woods, the glaring headlights of a car shattered the darkness like two clubs. A jeep lurched and forced its way in. When it braked to a stop, a woman barely managed to push open the door and climb out. Drunk, she clutched her forehead, her silver hair cascading down. The heels of her high heels sank deeply into the muddy woods, and her gait was as unsteady as the jeep itself, as if she were trying to escape. Before the woman could even leave the park's wooded area, a tall, handsome white man in the driver's seat of the jeep swiftly got out, grabbed her wrist with his large hand, and forcibly pulled her back into the car. Tren, let me go home. What do you mean by going back? Stay right here and don't go anywhere. The white young man roughly shoved the woman into the back seat. His eyes greedily gazed at her breasts, which, under the dim, warm light of the car, were even more pronounced after unbuttoning one of the top buttons of her shirt. Her long legs, clasped in black pantyhose, were nervously clamped together. "Bitch, it's only been a few months, and you're already in great shape." The white young man panted, unhooking his jacket and belt, and ducked into the car. "Let me go, is there anyone? Help." Ugh. The woman finally realized what was about to happen, but she was held down by the young man. As she opened her mouth to plead for help, a hand clamped over her mouth, and her neck was strangled. Woo. The lack of oxygen made the woman's already dizzy head even more groggy, and her weakening body gradually lost the strength to resist. Crackling, a slight tear in the black pantyhose, the white young man's eyes flashed red. The white young man's movement suddenly paused, and a hand silently landed on his shoulder. Before he could look back, he was yanked out of the car with an unimaginable force, and his back slammed hard into a tree 5 meters away. What a powerful force! The white young man gasped, and he bent over in pain and lay on the ground. He saw a tall figure standing in front of him. Her face was hard to see in the dark woods, but it was clearly a woman with a model's figure. How could it be possible? The force just now made him mistake it for a strong man with the physique of a boxing champion. At this time, a black-haired boy also hurried over, wearing the same matching clothes as the woman. "I urge you to leave me alone. This is a private matter between me and my girlfriend." The white youth struggled to climb up, holding onto the tree trunk. He reached into his trouser pocket with his right hand and threatened, "I'm armed. If you don't leave, I'll use self-defense." Diana's face remained calm as she positioned herself in front of the youth and took a step forward. "Why are you provoking her?" Nian muttered to himself. Then, leaving his back to his aunt, he surveyed the car. The sight stunned him. She was an acquaintance. The silver-haired woman lying in the car. It was none other than his class's assistant instructor, Felicia Hardy. Felicia's shirt was a mess, several buttons ripped open, revealing the firmness of her black undergarment. A corner of her knee-length skirt was torn, and her black tights were ripped slightly from the knees up. Her long, silver-white hair scattering carelessly across the seat and the dirty petals. Felicia's eyes trembled slightly, tears welling in her eyes. A red mark of a slap etched on one side of her delicate, fair face, and a bruise etched on her slender neck from being pinched. Nian glanced away quickly, a flame of rage burning in his heart. At the same time, the screams of the white youth echoed behind him. Holding a gun would only make his suffering worse. Nian first pulled back the hem of Felicia's dress, then shook her shoulder and asked, "Teacher, are you okay?" Felicia, still semi-conscious, fluttered her eyelashes slightly before opening her beautiful, slightly watery eyes. Seeing the familiar face of the young man nearby, she was clearly dazed for a moment. "Nian, classmate. It's me. Are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Dizzy? Did you drink?" Nian was asking earnestly when Felicia finally regained some strength. She struggled to stand, holding Nian tightly in her arms. With a twist of her lips, she sobbed like a child. Who was the teacher and who was the student? Nian was a little stunned, unsure where to put his hands. But he knew Felicia must be terrified. "Don't worry, it's okay now," Nian whispered soothingly, patting Felicia's back and stroking her soft, silky silver hair, as if comforting a child. After crying for a long time in Nian's arms, Felicia finally stopped crying. As if she had finally sobered up from her drunken stupor and realized that there were other people present, she quickly stepped out of Nian's arms and tidied up her messy clothes. The fear and trepidation on her face turned into shame. Nian knew that Felicia had recovered from her previous panic and realized that it was not good to hug her students. So he tactfully did not talk to teacher Felicia, got out of the car and went outside to watch the battle on his aunt's side. Well, the so-called battle was naturally over as expected. Diana stood there calmly and elegantly, with her foot on a pistol that had not yet been released. The white youth was curled up on the ground in front of her, foaming at the mouth and already unconscious. "Diana, are you okay?" Nian asked. "What do you think?" Diana turned around and smiled slightly. "How is your teacher?" "Fortunately, we arrived in time." Nian let out a breath, looked at the unconscious white young man on the ground coldly and said, "Let's call the police first." He was afraid that if he didn't call the police, he would not be able to help but use other disciplinary measures. Diana nodded and took out her cell phone from her pocket. Suddenly, Felicia suddenly walked out of the car and said, "Don't call the police." "Why?" "Teacher, he is committing a crime." Nian's eyes were full of confusion. Felicia looked at the white young man lying on the ground with a complicated look, and said bitterly, He is a friend I met in college, so let him go this time. Teacher, are you serious? If you let him go now, he will probably continue to attack you in the future. Nian raised his eyebrows. Hearing this, Felicia bit her lower lip hard and said nothing. Nian was about to ask more, but Diana grabbed his hand just in time. She mused, let's get you home first. Okay, let's get out of here. Felicia agreed immediately, turning away, not even glancing at the white young man on the ground. Nian and Diana walked Felicia home. Felicia remained silent the entire way. Until Felicia returned to her apartment in Washington. She bowed again to the two of them in thanks and closed the door. She left through Felicia's apartment. Nian looked at Diana, who was standing by. Why did you stop me just now? Diana's eyes gleamed with wisdom, and she whispered, your teacher's male friend has a very wealthy family background. Even if we call the police, it wouldn't be of much use. Your teacher should know that, so he doesn't want to implicate us and offend him. I see. Nian narrowed his eyes, but suddenly smiled. No matter how wealthy their family background was, could it be as wealthy as theirs? If they didn't call the police, the other party would face a more severe punishment. When Nian left just now, he left a jar-splitting body he carried with him, a jellyfish clone, on the white young man. Which university does your teacher teach at? Diana suddenly asked. State University, what's wrong? Nian asked puzzledly. Diana replied calmly, nothing. It just made it impossible for that guy to go to school. Nian suddenly understood. He finally knew who he inherited this temperament from. A new chapter has been reviewed again. Chapter 167, The Sheriff Field Begins? Goodbye Dacheo. With the connections Diana had built over the years, no matter how prominent a person's family background, she could prevent any school from accepting him. His fame and honor would be wiped out in an instant. As for Nian, his punishment would be much simpler and more brutal. Guan Luo's jellyfish clones weren't just for 24/7 surveillance, they could also devour objects. While they could only swallow tiny amounts, their bite force was unmatched by ordinary creatures. Even the mighty shark king Nanavi was nearly hunted and devoured by a swarm of jellyfish clones. Nian wasn't in a rush. Guan Luo had already established a presence. He could wait a few days before letting the jellyfish parasitizing the white youth take action. Regardless of anything else, the tools of the intended crime had to be seized. Returning home. Holding hands intimately, Nian and Diana didn't notice that, perched on the roof of a 20-story building just off the street, a figure in a tight black and white spider suit was crouching, its hood's white lenses reflecting their figures. Meanwhile, in Felicia's apartment. Inside the locked apartment, in the bathroom, Felicia stood naked before the mirror, the steam obscuring her graceful, voluptuous form. She leaned forward against the wall, letting the hot water pour down from the shower head. Her long, wet silver hair cascaded down to her hips. Her eyes, unblinking under the water, shone with resentment and indifference, a savage madness. The immense psychological blow seemed to drive a woman to a feral, animalistic state. The edges of her eyebrows and eyelashes, once mostly black, suddenly and eerily turned silver white. Crack! Shocking cracks inexplicably appeared on the wall. Reflected in the bathroom mirror, the steam faintly revealed a pair of black cat ears, a pair of sharp black-haired claws, and a swaying black tail. At the doorway, Nian and Diana released their grip and stared at the closed front door. Once they returned home, their relationship would undoubtedly return to its former state, having shifted from the couple they'd practiced tonight. As if having thought of this, the two of them paused at the doorway. Without a moment's hesitation, Nian and Diana turned sideways, their bodies tightly embracing each other. One slowly lowered her head, the other slightly raised on tiptoes. Nian grasped the exposed, slender waist with both hands, supple and smooth, as if touching a sacred and priceless object. He entangled with a fish-like, fragrant softness, savoring the warm, violet-scented drink. Rapidly growing silver hair flowed down, and the two divine powers continued to intertwine. In a room, a crimson-haired girl sat cross-legged on the bed, her eyes closed, still breathing. Her lovely face and delicate figure resembled a lifelike doll. At that moment, a shadow, as if escaping, like a flickering light, passed through the wall and disappeared into the girl's body. Wanda, sitting cross-legged on her bed, her spirit wandering, suddenly opened her jewel-like eyes. As if she had endured a tremendous shock, witnessing a scene beyond her imagination. She gasped for air, her cheeks flushed like apples, and her heartbeat pounded like a rabbit. Master, Miss Diana. How could they? How could they? Wanda froze. For a 13-year-old girl, this was too shocking. Hearing the sound of the door opening outside, Wanda slapped her cheeks in her room, forcing herself to calm down, otherwise she would be exposed. The next morning. I'm going to work. Be safe, Auntie. Nian and Diana said goodbye at home. Yes. They had returned to their old relationship, a relationship they had maintained for 17 years. Last night's events felt like a dream, buried deep in their hearts as practice. Wanda, I'm going to a friend's house at noon, so I won't be back for lunch, Nian said, sitting in a chair, eating breakfast. I know, Wanda said angrily, as if she were sulking. Nian glanced at her in confusion. Who pissed you off? Someone from school. My classmates. How dare they mess with me? Wanda snorted. That's true, Nian nodded. After all, Wanda was now a potential disciple of the Ancient One, and her strength was far greater than his. So who pissed you off? I won't tell you. Wanda was displeased. She opened her mouth wide and took a big bite of the sausage before passing it to Nian. Why did you eat my sausage? Nian was confused, looking at the missing piece of sausage on the plate. I bit your sausage, you wicked master. Wanda turned and ran away angrily. Nian's mouth twitched. So, his name had been upgraded from idiot to villain? This black-hearted little maid, it seemed like she needed a spanking sometime. Saturday, 11 o'clock. It was supposed to be the time he'd agreed to meet Kara. Nian put the gifts he'd prepared into his backpack, left, and took the elevator to the top floor of the residential complex. Just as Nian reached the rooftop, high above Washington, D.C., the distant clouds were suddenly shattered by a strange and powerful force. A black dot lurched closer, one moment at the edge of vision, the next, hovering overhead. Kara, clad in her Supergirl suit, fluttered her red cape as she landed gracefully in front of Nian. She wore the same blue Supergirl tights, red skirt, and dark red combat boots, but today, Kara was not wearing black stockings, revealing her absolute femininity in the sunlight. Come on, Senior, Kara smiled, extending her hand. Nian grasped it firmly, and a tangible force gently enveloped her. He knew it was the biological force field unique to the Kryptonians. A moment later, Supergirl Kara, carrying Nian, soared into the sky, breaking the sound barrier and the clouds once again, and soaring out of the city in a streak of light. In less than a minute, they flew over several modern cities and reached a suburb of Metropolis. It was a small wooden hut surrounded by wheat fields, with few other homes for miles around. It was similar to Kara's adoptive parents' home, so a Superman's home must have a large farm? Kara set Nian down at the hut's door and called out, Kel, I'm here. Coming. A deep, powerful male voice, accompanied by the clatter of footsteps, echoed from within. The door opened. A tall, muscular man stood in the doorway, his shirt barely concealing the bulging muscles beneath, making the door seem smaller than it actually was. Despite his glasses, he possessed a refined, unpretentious demeanor. His real name was Kal-El, his Earth name was Clark, and he also went by Superman. Carl, standing at the door, and Nian, standing outside, stared at each other, each silent for a moment. This was their second meeting. Chapter 168 Supergirl's Most Beautiful Moment. The Wooden Manor House. In the first-floor living room, Nian and Carl sat on the sofa, Nian watching TV while Carl read a newspaper. The aroma of steaming meat wafted from the nearby kitchen. The female reporter I'd met in the square last time, Superman Carl's girlfriend, Lois Lane, was the chef. Upon arriving, Supergirl Kara immediately changed into her room on the second floor, into a loose-fitting long-sleeved shirt and casual cotton pants. Her dark blonde hair was tied into a ponytail, and she clattered downstairs in her pink slippers. The beautiful girl ignored Nian and expertly went into the kitchen to help. The two men were left alone on the sofa, and the atmosphere became awkward for a moment. Nian felt like he was visiting his girlfriend's house for the first time. The last time he'd experienced this was when he'd visited Kara's adoptive parents. Things were moving faster than expected. In just 2 meetings, he'd met all of Kara's relatives. Well, except for the mysterious sister, whose fate was unknown and who was suspected of wandering in outer space. That young man last time, was it you? Carl suddenly spoke, glancing at Nian without using his X-ray vision. A young man? Oh, he'd fought Superman in his super god mode. Nian hesitated, then nodded, admitting it. If Superman Carl really wanted to know, he could just ask Kara directly, so there was no point in denying it. Besides, Nian didn't think Superman Carl would hurt him, unless he did something to Kara. To Nian's surprise, Carl calmly put down the newspaper, a smile on his resolute, upright face. That's impressive. Compared to General Zod and Doomsday, he puts me under even more pressure. At this point, Carl raised a brow. By the way, you don't know who General Zod is, do you? He's the leader of the Kryptonian warship that once visited Earth. That was just a coincidence, a coincidence. Nian scratched his head. Could he really say it was a coincidence? Activating Super God mode requires the cooperation of at least 3 people, including Superman's cousin, of course. Nian naturally couldn't reveal the secret of his own abilities, otherwise the seemingly amiable Superman would likely get angry with him. A chance encounter won't defeat me. Superman Carl gazed at Nian with deep eyes, asking thoughtfully, I want to know if you can regain that power a second time. Nian glanced at the ponytail girl in the kitchen and murmured, it should be possible. That's good, that's good. Superman Carl's eyes lit up. In that moment, he thought about many things, and couldn't help but mutter to himself. Mr. Carl. Nian had a feeling that Superman Carl was not in a good state, or that he was planning something. With Superman's immense power, the upper limit of superhero combat power, if even he needed to plan and strategize, it must be something unimaginable. Perhaps it was an event that required the backup power of Super God mode. Just call me Carl. We might as well be a family from now on. Carl smiled brightly and said bluntly, Kara's a good person. She's the only family left on my home planet, Krypton. I know she's always been fond of you. As early as half a year ago, she. Nian's eyes widened. Superman Carl hadn't finished his words. With a panicked exclamation, Kara rushed out of the kitchen, her face flushing with shame. She interrupted Carl and shouted, you two, get ready for lunch. Okay, Carl replied quickly, standing up and patting Nian on the shoulder as if to offer encouragement. Nian was speechless. Were all his brothers experts at sending their sisters off? It was lunchtime. Carl's adoptive mother, Martha, had also returned home to eat. Faced with the eager Mrs. Martha and Miss Louise, Nian could only sit upright, his scalp tingling, and answer their questions earnestly, making Kara, sitting next to him, chuckle. Knowing that Nian had also been abandoned as a child, Superman's adoptive mother, Mrs. Martha, felt deeply sympathetic and constantly invited him to come play whenever he had time. Nian didn't know how to explain it. Being picked up and raised by Aunt Diana was the greatest fortune he could ever have, bar none. Still, Martha and Louise made him feel incredibly close. After lunch, Nian quickly integrated into the family atmosphere. He took a quick look at the ring on Louise's hand and the matching ring on Carl's left middle finger, winking and joking, looks like I'll be able to attend a wedding soon. Carl and Louise smiled at each other. Carl shrugged and said, if not this year, then next year. Then, I hope you two will be the best man and bridesmaid. Although he didn't name anyone, everyone at the table understood. Nian's understanding of Superman deepened. Wow, even this could be turned back on him? He truly was a god. Cousin, eat yours. Kara glared at Carl. Yes, cousin. Superman Carl smiled faintly. He was already in his early 30s, while Kara looked barely an adult. It was incredibly strange for the two of them to be calling each other brother and sister. Nian suddenly remembered Kara's true age, around 30-something, a legitimate Kryptonian girl. After lunch, Martha specifically asked Kara to take Nian to the nearby fields, and Kara gladly accepted. That afternoon, passing through vast cornfields and scrubland, the view suddenly opened up, an endless expanse of fields. Lush green grass stretched from their feet to the mountains beyond, the grass soft as a carpet. Between the fields and the mountains lay a lake. As the sun set, its rays and reflections were reflected on the lake's surface. A young man and a young woman sat leaning against the slope of the grassland. Nian wore the casual clothes he'd worn this morning, and Kara had changed into her Supergirl costume. After all, the so-called Supergirl costume was a common and normal garment on Krypton, categorized by style for home, diplomacy, and combat. However, choosing to wear this outfit casually in front of Nian also signified Kara's affirmation of her identity as both a Kryptonian and a human being. Look, Supergirl, Kara exhaled suddenly, and a gust of frigid wind suddenly swept forward, frothing the lake into shimmering ice. The cold air collided with a warm breeze from the valley, and soon a misty, white wind blew upward. Nian's eyes flashed with surprise. Her red cape and skirt fluttered in the wind, and Kara, with her heroic yet playful demeanor, slightly lifted her chest, like an inverted bowl. Her flowing hair was a hue of platinum and dark gold, and a rainbow hung behind her like a halo. The strength and confidence of Krypton, as well as the kindness and gentleness of humanity, were unmistakably revealed. This moment should be Supergirl's most beautiful. Chapter 169 Kara. A faint crimson glow and golden light seemed to spread beneath the mist. Atop the vibrant green carpet of grass, Supergirl Kara's flowing hair, her innocent and lovely fair face, her slender, smooth neck, the alluring, pure, and absolute realm of a young woman, all the priceless beauties of youth, shone with a faint arc of light, a soft, sweet pink shimmering against a tender white. Nian's heart pounded, and for a moment, he couldn't look away until they met Kara's sparkling eyes. Right, Nian turned away, opened his bag beside him, and pulled out the black Superman suit folded inside. "Last time, I forgot to give it back to you, you." Nian exclaimed, dropping the black Superman suit onto the grass beside him. The Kryptonian family totem shone with a sacred brilliance in the sunlight. It was the black-haired boy who was pushed to the ground on the grass. Nian opened his eyes wide in astonishment, only to see Kara turning over and sitting on him with unusual boldness. One hand wearing a dark red glove was placed on the ground next to his ear, while the other hand had already bitten off the glove with its small teeth, and the slender milky white index finger lightly poked his left chest. Nian could intuitively feel a gentle but non-negligible force, as if it penetrated through the clothes and leather and lightly touched his heart. The comfortable and numb static touch spread from the heart along the veins to the whole body. "Kara, calm down." Nian took a deep breath, and his breathing became much faster instinctively. Perhaps every extraordinary person he met was stronger than him. This posture was too familiar. He was shivering with anger. When would he be able to stand up? Whether he could stand up or not, Nian didn't know, but somewhere had already stood up. "Nian. Senior, I'm very, very calm." Kara's perfectly shaped chest rose and fell noticeably, and her exposed skin grew a pinker shade, a hue far more vibrant and natural, like being drunk, lending the gentle, sweet beauty an even more voluptuous air. "I'm calmer now than ever," Kara whispered to herself. What Nian didn't know was that, as Lorna had said, he was a walking jewel, a figure the Transcendental could not ignore. The passive ability of the master of a dependent. Besides creating a basic level of favorability towards strangers possessing transcendental powers, there was also a hidden trait: the stronger the Transcendental master, the more irresistible their affection. Furthermore, with increased physical contact and emotional exchange, favorability levels would increase significantly compared to others. A determined Transcendental might be able to resist this temptation, but if contact became frequent, emotions would overflow like a glass bottle filled with water. Putting aside the sheer power of Krypton, Kara's emotional resilience was far inferior to that of Diana and the Ancient One. For Supergirl Kara, the accumulated water had already cracked the glass bottle. Even before, when she'd first lent Nian her Kryptonian powers, Kara had wanted to be the first to take a bite of this cake, but the timing wasn't right then. And now, knowing that not only Gwen but many others were eyeing this cake, how could Supergirl Kara pass up this opportunity? Kara, it's just because the atmosphere is so good right now. Nian tried to persuade her, but he couldn't contain himself any longer. After all, he was still a passionate teenager, and Kara's Supergirl costume was a bit short. Sitting astride her like that was unbearable. But before Nian could finish, his mouth was blocked as Kara slumped down. Compared to his previous, fleeting touch, this time, Nian could feel it more deeply. Some parts of the Kryptonian woman with a body of steel were so soft and delicious that he feared they would melt. This is the bioforce field at work. Master of the familiar, power activated. Nian's eyes widened. His hair remained unchanged, only his biceps and abdominal muscles flexed like an assembly line. His muscular frame, like steel, stretched his shirt slightly. A force a million times more powerful than that of an ordinary human awakened within him, condensing into a force field that surged outward with overwhelming pressure. A single, unstable burst obliterated the surrounding grass within 100 meters. Its aftermath rippled through the mountains miles away. This was Nian's second Kryptonian power, transforming into Superman mode. But this time, Without Gwen's power as a foundation, his astonishing abilities awakened one after another. Xinian's superhuman senses were indiscriminately heightened and amplified. His strength and energy, like when he first gained demigod power, spiraled uncontrollably, spiraling out of control and into a state of rampage. Xinian, how could this happen? Kara began in shock, her own superhuman force field sweeping outward, attempting to quell the uncontrolled superhuman power. But she had forgotten one thing: Nian also possessed a superhuman force field, a trait they shared. The barrier of the superhuman force field had barely been activated when it was violently ripped apart. Nian's eyes burned slightly, his body trembling with a single, high-frequency tremor. His clothes and shoes shattered, and countless cracks appeared on the hillside below, each stretching over 10 meters long. Every gesture was destructive. This was the uncontrolled power of Krypton. Nian's hands instinctively fell on the girl's slender waist. With his superhuman senses amplified, he could sense the soft, perfectly curved curves beneath the tough female Superman suit. Now superhuman, without the control and coordination of the superhuman force field, it seemed only the body of this fellow Superman before him could withstand the damage. Kara, Nian realized, needing to vent the uncontrolled superhuman force within him. "It's okay, Senior." Kara's eyes met Xinian's, and as if realizing something, she immediately nodded, her cheeks flushing. The superhuman Xinian no longer hesitated. With one hand, he grasped the black Superman suit beside him, and with the other, he hugged Superwoman Kara tightly around the waist. With a single movement of his body, the entire grassy hillside crumbled away. Uncontrollably, his speed was incredible. Carrying Kara with him, the two, entangled like a stream of light, crashed into the vast lake ahead. Boom! The thin, translucent white ice was shattered. A torrent of water surged into the sky, then fell like a torrential rain, painting a rainbow in the air. The crimson afterglow of the setting sun fell upon the lake. This was only the beginning. As if an ancient monster had awakened beneath the lake, the vast waters boiled to boiling point, gurgling and swirling waves. A deep, throaty growl rose from the center. Not only the lake, but the ground around it also began to shake slightly, as if someone was pounding it with a giant hammer. A few kilometers away, inside the cabin. "Carl, what's going on?" Louise asked, perplexed, looking at the water glass on the table, which was constantly oozing water. "This is..." As someone who had experienced it, Carl had a vague guess. He didn't know how to explain it for a moment, but finally hugged his fiancée from behind, kissed her earlobe, and said, "Don't worry about these details." "These are details." Louise was confused. "Isn't this an earthquake? Why not vote for it?" If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, The Correct Way to Obtain Permanent Abilities. The sun sank behind the mountains, and night fell, the starry sky ablaze. But the earthquakes hadn't stopped. Since the afternoon, minor earthquakes had been reported in the suburbs of the metropolitan area, forcing many residents to sleep outdoors. The epicenter of the earthquake was a natural lake, and the tremors were felt more strongly in the vicinity. Fortunately, the surrounding fields and forests prevented any residents from noticing the lake's abnormality. The vast lake, with a radius of nearly a mile, had transformed into veritable, steaming tepid water, resembling an oversized, natural open-air hot spring. The ice on the lake's surface had long since melted into steam, and the water sometimes cascaded upwards like a waterfall, sometimes surging like a whirlpool, the water rising hundreds of meters into the air before cascading down like a torrential downpour. This tremor continued for some time after nightfall. The lake suddenly split in two, and from below came a low, beastly roar, accompanied by the angelic humming of angels. Then, the water erupted into a mighty surge. Two figures, embracing, flew out of the lake, their black and red capes rustling. It was none other than Nian, clad in a super black battlesuit. He embraced the slightly smaller Supergirl from the front, their two tightly clasped together like a human missile careening diagonally into the mountain range. It was like a unique battle. A battle between Kryptonians. In the nick of time, Nian managed to flip over, allowing his back to slam into the mountain. Boom! Countless debris flew, and the mountain top was shattered by the two men. The impact of the shattering mountain seemed to tighten their embrace, leaving almost no gap. Their trajectory remained unchanged, as they continued diagonally upwards towards the night sky, their speed increasing. The sound barrier was easily broken mid-air, along with the clouds. Half a second after emerging from the lake, they were already beyond Earth in the next. Their black and red capes, one in front of the other, barely concealed their bodies. The sun's boundless radiance bathed the two, seemingly one, in a breathtaking arc of light. Nearby, the arcing azure earth and the silvery white moon shone. The vast, dark universe held an eternal, mysterious, and tranquil beauty. There was no sound. Supergirl couldn't help but bite Xinian's shoulder fiercely. Seeing Xinian's slightly red eyes, a hint of triumph and admiration flashed across them. Supergirl Kara, a little embarrassed, reversed her attack. She zeroed in on a patch of ground below, clutching Xinian in her arms, and plummeted downward. The two transformed into a small, dark meteorite hurtling toward Earth. Finally, the meteorite landed on a towering, snowy mountain in the western United States, where the ice and snow had yet to melt. The sharp, protruding peak was flattened 10 meters downward, and the earth shook. Like a volcanic eruption, the avalanche tore down, burying the valley's lush green grass and forests. A night passed. Beams of golden sunlight pierced the night, shone down on the collapsed snowy summit that resembled a volcanic crater. A boy and a girl, each wearing a black and blue Superman suit, lay there, their hair, capes, and suits covered in white frost and snow. Xinian used one arm as a pillow for Kara to rest on, and with the other, he held the girl's soft body. Perhaps because he'd only just finished sleeping due to the Superman's internal energy field converter, and because the warmth of her body was too comfortable, he slept until almost noon. Until Xinian's right hand, resting on Kara, had once felt soft as cotton, but suddenly became as hard as steel. No, it wasn't Kara who had hardened. It was the Kryptonian power within him that had vanished. Without Kara's Superman force field, the touch of an ordinary person felt like metal. The duration of the Master of the Familiar had expired, meaning 12 hours had passed. Just as his brain registered this, Xinian jolted awake. He opened his eyes and surveyed his surroundings, seeing the sun almost overhead. He quickly patted Kara's shoulder, waking her from her sleep. Kara, sleepy-eyed, propped herself up and rubbed her eyes, which were struggling to open. A few traces of white tears still lingered in the corners of her eyes. Her tender little mouth subconsciously murmured, "Ah, is it over? I'm not dead yet. Don't worry, Kara, you're still intact for now." Xinian looked Kara up and down, smoothing down her wrinkled red dress. However, Xinian soon noticed something was amiss. This something was wrong, himself. Xinian didn't feel cold. You see, he had lost his Kryptonian powers and was perched atop a snow-capped mountain in the western wilderness. Even if his black super warrior suit could keep out the cold, it offered no real protection from the cold on his hands, neck, or head. Something's wrong. Xinian lowered his head and felt his body. Though he'd lost his temporary superhuman abilities, he still looked resilient and strong. His muscles, as if forged from steel, were still there. Encased in the tight, dark Superman suit, his torso still displayed the perfect curves of an assembly line. Xinian tried to clench his fists, but the same sense of strength as a normal human remained. He stood atop the snow, gazing into the distance, his vision still only extended to about 10 kilometers. Nothing had changed. Aside from his physical form, he retained his superhuman qualities. What was the point? A bodybuilder? Xinian frowned, then a sudden thought struck him. He reached out and slapped himself across the cheek. A thud. Seeing this, Supergirl Kara, standing nearby, asked in surprise, "Senior, what are you doing? It doesn't hurt." Xinian didn't respond. His eyes lit up slightly, and he slapped himself again with his right palm. This time, he used all his strength. Smack. Atop the collapsed snowy mountain top, a resounding slap resounded. "Xinian, what's wrong with you?" Kara, visibly terrified, hurried forward to grab Xinian's hand, preventing him from further self-harm. "I'm fine. Should I say? I'm fine. Very fine." A flash of enlightenment flashed in Xinian's eyes. He struck himself in the face with all his might, yet felt no pain, and his palms felt no numbness at all. He vaguely understood what had happened to his body. "Kara, hit me." "Ah, what did you say?" "Hit me, and you'll know." "Use your fist, but try it gently first," Xinian said seriously. Okay. Kara hesitated, sensing Xenian's seriousness, and then gently numbed his chest with his fist. Though it was a gentle touch, it was actually several times more powerful than a human's. The inhuman force felt like a heavy blow. Xenian couldn't help but step back a few steps before stopping, but then he laughed out loud. It doesn't hurt at all. Kara's eyes were filled with amazement. Kara, use 50% of your strength this time. Try it. Xenian's face was brimming with confidence. He patted his chest. As soon as he finished speaking, a fist swiftly landed on his chest. With the force of a hurricane. Boom. Xenian was instantly sent flying backwards, like a cannonball, caught in the whirlwind, slamming into the opposite mountain. His body sank deep into the rock, triggering another massive avalanche. Xenian. Kara swiftly flew over and dug him out of the deep mountain. Although Xenian looked a little disheveled, his body, like his Superman suit, was intact. That punch of yours hurt a little bit in my chest. Xenian, having been pulled out by Kara, smiled. At the same time, an instinctive message entered his mind. Subconsciously, the common sense that touching hot water burns one's hands, the fear of a venomous snake's breath, and the vigilance against weapons and knives, all these common sense precautions were rectified. That's right. Xenian had acquired a special ability from Kara's Kryptonian lineage, a Superman-exclusive power, the Man of Steel. It wouldn't fade with time, but was permanent. No, it's more than just a Man of Steel. It seems to me that my body is still as flexible as before. It's a Man of Steel with an optimized bioforce field. Xenian marveled. It wasn't easy. He had finally acquired a permanent supernatural ability. It was only a defensive Man of Steel. But there was one thing to understand, Xenian's acquired ability automatically optimized its weaknesses. Therefore, even against Kryptonite or the Red Sun, his Man of Steel wouldn't be weakened or ineffective. A Man of Steel without weaknesses, what did that mean? It meant that Xenian's survivability had skyrocketed by more than 1,000-fold. Even lying still, not only modern humans, but most supernatural beings wouldn't be able to harm him in the slightest. In some ways, Xenian's frontal defense index surpassed Superman's. Of course, that was only physical defense. Everything else remained at the level of an ordinary human. He was incredibly resilient. Why do I feel like this ability is specifically designed to protect me from hatchets? Xenian internally complained, yet he was still incredibly excited. This opened his eyes to another path, a path to true strength. So, not only could the Servant Master temporarily acquire all abilities, but through last night's method, they could also acquire some of the abilities of the supernatural. Xenian had a feeling. Perhaps his Servant Master ability could also permanently acquire all the physical abilities of the supernatural, but he hadn't yet found the stringent conditions that would trigger that. Yes, stringent. After all, even permanently possessing some abilities required the level he'd achieved last night. To permanently acquire all abilities, Xenian couldn't imagine the level of achievement required. Unable to figure it out, he simply gave up. Perhaps one day, like today, he'd unexpectedly met the conditions to acquire them. Kara, have you sensed any changes in yourself? Xenian gathered his thoughts and looked at Superwoman Kara beside him. My body, changes. Kara tilted her head in confusion, suddenly covered her still slightly swollen belly, clamped her legs tightly together and said in shame and anger, it's coming out soon, does this count as? Xenian. That's not what I'm talking about. Xenian felt that not only his body had undergone changes, but Kara's body should have also undergone some changes, but she hasn't discovered it yet. Chapter 171 Kara, the cat-like woman who wants to win the bid. On the slopes of a snowy mountain, clear, melted ice formed a stream, gurgling down the mountainside. A beautiful girl sat on a flattened rock beside the stream. She removed her dark red combat boots, oblivious to the cold water as she washed her feet. Only then, standing nearby, did Xenian reflect on what he had done the previous night. He looked at Kara's youthful, beautiful face, adorned with a gentle, soft smile. The red cape, which came with Supergirl's suit, was as vibrant as ever, though with a few wrinkles and visible handprints. Every strand of hair shed from her cape shone with a platinum sheen. Her long, well-proportioned legs were halfway submerged in the stream, and the cool water swished down her legs in an arc, the water flowing down her long, ivory-shine legs. Those white, delicate hands, capable of shattering mountains, performed these light, gentle actions, a striking contrast that struck Xenian. And then there was. Though her appearance remained unchanged from yesterday morning, Supergirl Kara's demeanor subtly matured, alluring. Seeing Kara washing her legs with a troubled expression, Nian felt a surge of desire. Who could resist? It might have been fine before, but now that he'd unleashed his inner virility for the first time, there was no going back. But Nian knew that if he touched Kara again, he'd revert to his out-of-control Superman form from yesterday. It was already Sunday, nearing noon, and he had to attend a family dinner at his childhood sweetheart Gwen's house for her coming-of-age ceremony that evening. Nian, you can't wash it clean, Kara said helplessly, her feet splashing gently as she muttered, let's go home and take a good shower. Just that simple sentence nearly broke Nian's hard-won defenses. Nian took a deep breath and swallowed it back. It's my fault. I should have taken protective measures yesterday. I did. But protective measures, do they work? Kara pulled two small, square packages from a hard-to-find pocket on the waistband of her Superman suit. With a gesture, she stuffed them back into the tiny inner pocket. That's true, Nian said, a sudden realization. It seemed like even protective measures wouldn't have prevented her from getting the way she was yesterday. Besides, wouldn't it have been such a waste if I had taken protective measures? Kara's hand gently cupped her belly, shrouded in the blue suit, and she spoke frankly with an inexplicable anticipation. She came to school to experience human life and integrate into human society. Therefore, for Kara, the opportunity to strengthen the Kryptonian family and raise her child of love was a far greater priority than anything else. Kara, Nian looked at her seriously. If you keep going like this, you might consider taking a leave of absence tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Ah, I was wrong. Kara stuck out her pink tongue, her eyes fluttering cautiously. Her small, delicate nose twitched noticeably, revealing a look of lingering fear. Last night, at a certain moment, our daughter of Krypton, Kara, truly thought she was dead. At least, broken, for a while. Kara didn't want to do it again. Thrills aside, you can't risk your life every day, can you? Supergirl Kara flew directly to the rooftop of Nian's family's residential building with Nian. As soon as she set Nian down, Kara, with a worried look on her face, flew back to the Washington suburbs, toward her adoptive parents' home. Nian took the elevator downstairs, opened the door, and found the house empty. Indeed. Even though it was Sunday, Diana would still be at the law firm, where she was a shareholder, around noon. Wanda would also go to school for housekeeping training or study magic at the Ancient One Sanctuary. Ultimately, the only idle person in the family was Nian. No, there were 2 or 3 others. Little Emperor, Little Poison, you guys have even more free time than me, lying flat at home all day long. Nian walked into the living room, reached out his large hand to Little Emperor, who was sprawled in a corner of his sofa, and began to stroke him vigorously. He used to bark when he came home, but now he was so lazy he couldn't even open his eyes to look at him. The young metamorphosis didn't resist, instead squinting comfortably. Its appearance had barely changed over the months, its 4 paws bent docilely, and it rolled in place, revealing its flat, white, fuzzy belly. Nian didn't hesitate, stroking the softer-feeling cat's belly. Little Emperor's tail suddenly twisted and rose of its own accord, its hair oozing a dark, ink-like liquid, condensing into tentacles with strands of hair. The tail tipped into a black, alien-looking head. Don't call me Little Poison. I told you I'm Venom. The dark head's eyes were pale as it stared intently at the boy, baring its many ferocious fangs. It whispered in a sinister, hoarse voice, your body feels different to me than before. There have been some changes, yes, it's gotten harder. Nian nodded in acknowledgement, pinching his steel-like abs, which weren't very noticeable now that he was dressed. He wasn't surprised by the symbiote Venom's appearance. After his last showdown with the symbiote Venom, he and his aunt had been parasitizing it, and Venom, which had long been parasitizing Xia Wang, would occasionally assert its presence like this. What a pity, the symbiote Venom sighed regretfully, quickly transforming into liquid and flowing back into the cat's body, vanishing completely in an instant. Its pity was that this human boy had the most suitable host physique for it to parasitize, bar none. But once parasitizing Nian, triggered by the master of the companion, Nian would also acquire the symbiote's characteristics. Once Nian transforms into a symbiote, he becomes ill-suited to parasitism, instead becoming suited to parasitizing others. This prevents him from fully utilizing the abilities Venom provides. This is something Venom, the symbiote, has always regretted. By the way, Venom, the symbiote living within Xiao Wang, suddenly formed a mouth from its cat-like back and spoke hoarsely. Lately, I've sensed the presence of my kind again. My kind. Nian's hand, caressing Xiao Wang's soft belly, abruptly stopped. Venom's kindred spirits are naturally those strange alien creatures called symbiotes. He frowned. Are you sure? I'm sure, it's indeed my kind, Venom replied firmly. Where? Nian asked. I don't know, Venom replied. I only vaguely sense the presence of my kind. I can't pinpoint its exact location, but the general idea is, it's still in New York City. This was said as if nothing had been said. New York. Nian paused, pondering. Didn't you say that only 3 symbiotes came to Earth with you? Nian remembered those 3 symbiotes clearly. After all, they had been personally dealt with by the first trio. 2 of them had been banished to the Devourer's space, long devoid of parasites, and had long since perished. The 3rd symbiote had burned alive in the spacecraft cabin. Wait a minute. Nian thought. How do you symbiotes reproduce? Directly. But once you produce an offspring, you die. So, we symbiotes only choose to reproduce right before the end of our lives. Venom said, surprised. Are you saying that when Riot, the symbiote leader, was burned to death, he produced a symbiote offspring? Very likely. Nian's face was solemn. If that's the case, then its offspring must be stronger than the previous one, or not afraid of fire. Although he knew there were symbiotes hiding in New York City, Nian had no intention of taking action. After all, if they remained hidden, finding them would be as difficult as finding a needle in a haystack. So, he had to put it aside for now. Guanluo, you probably have something to tell me too. Nian looked out onto the balcony. As he spoke, the sun basked on the balcony, and a colorful starfish in a glass jar opened its single eye. Guanluo transmitted his message with his mind. 2 things. First, we've found the SYNOPSIS headquarters you're looking for. It's located in Manhattan, New York, on an island in the heart of urban renewal. Well done, Nian nodded, issuing instructions. Encircle the urban area surrounding the headquarters, then find a way to infiltrate the building and see if there's a silver-haired boy around 13 years old inside. Also, record anything special inside. The security there is quite good, but still far inferior to some civilizations in the universe. I'll try my best, Guanluo replied confidently. His mind moved. Suddenly, tiny, transparent creatures like jellyfish spread across New York City for hundreds of kilometers, hiding in people, cats, dogs, cars, and buildings, began to converge on SYNOPSIS headquarters, using the crowds and traffic on the streets surrounding SYNOPSIS headquarters. What's the second thing? Nian asked curiously. He could guess the first thing, but the second was beyond his grasp. Guanluo, didn't you attach a jellyfish clone to a white young man the night before last and ask me to keep an eye on him? I remember now, that's exactly what happened. Nian's eyes grew cold, and he said without hesitation, he's back home? Then we can confiscate the tools he was planning to use to commit the crime. He's dead, Guanluo's mental thoughts suddenly came. What did you say? Nian paused, then asked in a deep voice, when and how did he die? Last night, he died in his home in New York. As Guanluo spoke, his mental thought relayed a flood of information to Nian. Nian's mind immediately flashed with a series of realistic images, incredibly clear and detailed, like watching a VR movie from a god's perspective. The scene was a luxurious, spacious room, the doors and windows closed. Inside was a single white young man, the very same scumbag who had tried to force her to have sex with him earlier. The white young man, wearing designer clothes, was clearly drunk again. He tugged at his tie, panting heavily. His handsome face was twisted with a fiery crimson of anger, his eyes bloodshot and frantic. Recalling last night's events, the white young man couldn't contain his emotions, and he began smashing furniture. You stinking bitch. You dare to resist. Next time, I'll make you my plaything. You'll have to close your eyes and call me master, suck me. And those 2 damn passers-by. Smashing the lamp, worth tens of thousands of dollars, to the ground, the white young man finally felt a little better. He let out a sigh and was about to ask the nanny outside to come in and clean up the pieces, so he could use the plump buttocks for some relief. But then, with a crash, the window flew open, letting the night wind howl in. The bright, silvery moonlight streamed in, casting a graceful, eerie, and graceful figure across the room, like the shadow of a cat's tail, swaying slightly. Nian was stunned and bewildered. With his god's perspective, he could see more clearly than the white youth. It was a woman. A cat-like woman. Her silver hair, the color of moonlight, flew wildly. A half-black mask obscured her features, revealing only her sensual, crimson lips and a pair of piercingly bright, icy eyes. She wore a shiny black leather jacket, like a one-piece. As she crouched by the window like a cat, her mature, graceful figure defined by its curves. But what was astonishing was that the woman's hands resembled enlarged, animalistic cat paws, their outstretched claws gleaming with a cold light. A pair of cat ears and a tail sprouted from her head and back, creating a stunner of both grotesque and stunning beauty. "You are." The white youth turned away in surprise. He stared at the black cat woman at the window, a look of astonishment on his face, his eyes flashing with instinctive lust. But before he could finish his words, the black cat woman leaped forward like a predatory cat, closing in with inhuman speed. Her right paw slashed at the young man's throat, sending streams of blood splattering across the room. The moment her throat was slashed, the black cat woman tapped the ground with her toes and deftly dodged, avoiding the splatter of crimson blood. The white young man's eyes widened in terror. He clutched his neck, where warm blood gushed out. He opened his mouth to speak, but ultimately, unable to utter a single word, he fell backward to the floor. Without even glancing at the white man, the black cat woman swiftly used her claws to rip open the drawers and safe in the room, stuffing the large amount of banknotes and gold inside into a random bag. That was it. The black cat woman was about to leave when she suddenly paused, her cat-like eyes scanning the legs of the table. She stepped forward, extending her metal-like cat claws and crushing the tiny, translucent jellyfish clinging to the table. The archived scene Guan Luo had telepathically conveyed to Nian ended there. Nian remained stunned. Although her features were obscured, the figure of the black cat woman resembled someone in his memory. The original design suggested that the black cat had no tail, but I wanted one. What kind of cat girl is she without one? Rightly so. Chapter 172 for Gwen. The highly suspected offspring of the symbiote hidden in human cities, the secret behind SHIELD's abduction of Pietro, and the sudden transformation of the ruthless black cat thief. Although Nian could guess the specific reason for the third one, the fact that all of these events took place in New York left him with an inexplicable feeling. He had always been very perceptive about the extraordinary. New York, having just experienced an alien war, was worried that something major was about to happen. Fortunately, Nian had become more accustomed to the extraordinary than before. After gaining the power of the Man of Steel from Kara, it could be said that he had completely entered the realm of the extraordinary. At this moment, Nian was the extraordinary. It was already afternoon. Nian removed his black Superman suit, took a comfortable shower with the hottest water, and changed into a more formal shirt and suit. The suit was practically brand new, without a single wrinkle or dust mark. This was because Diana and Wanda often pulled clothes out of the closet, washing, drying, and ironing them. Another reason was that Nian wore too few clothes. He used formal attire like this less than 3 times a year, yet he bought at least 2 sets every year. Nian dressed for whatever was comfortable, and whenever possible, he wore loose, stylish casual wear. But tonight was Gwen's coming-of-age dinner, so he decided to wear it. For Gwen's sake, Nian was happy to do it. Fortunately, his Iron Man hadn't bulked up Nian, so it still fit him perfectly. And because the shirt held up a bit, it showed off his muscular figure, making him look even more stylish and radiant than before. He combed his messy hair and applied some wax. A new Nian walked out the door. Outside the bustling streets of Washington, Nian didn't immediately head to Gwen's house. Taking advantage of the time before the dinner, he wandered into a nearby designer jewelry store. Inside, several couples were browsing the merchandise. The women's eyes sparkled, and the men walking with them instinctively felt their pockets. Seeing the young boy walk in, a pretty, curvaceous white saleswoman, her skirt and high heels swung forward, flashing her signature sweet smile. "Sir, what kind of jewelry would you like to buy?" "Jewelry for young women," Nian mused. "A girlfriend?" "No, a good friend." The saleswoman looked visibly taken aback, but her professionalism held her own, and she smiled. "What's your budget?" "About 5,000. Nian pondered. He still had quite a bit of the date money his aunt had given him last time. This way. The saleswoman's eyes lit up, and she became more welcoming, ushering Xinian deeper into the store. This is it. After about 10 minutes, Xinian carefully selected a suitable piece of jewelry and had the saleswoman pack it. Okay, I'll pack it for you right away. The female clerk's smile grew even brighter. It was rare to see such straightforward customers these days. However, her smile quickly froze. At the entrance of the jewelry store, accompanied by a sudden scream, several customers who were about to leave were pushed back in by a masked man. Crack. At the same time, two other masked, black men, armed with AKs, strode quickly through the adjacent glass doorway. Are you done yet? Nian turned around and saw this, his mouth twitching slightly. Will you stop for a moment? Robbery. Everyone, get down where you are if you don't want to die. Seeing the customers and clerks running around in panic, the masked man in the lead immediately pulled a pistol from his waistband and fired a shot into the ceiling of the jewelry store. Bang! The high-hanging glass lamp shattered, and countless glass pieces tinkled to the ground. The 6 customers and 4 female employees in the store paled, their faces drooping as they all crouched down, their heads in their hands. The 2 white-collar men's pants dripped wet from their crotches. Kid, you want to die, don't you? One of the masked, burly black men growled. He glared coldly at the dark-haired teenager, the only one still standing, and raised his AK. It dawned on Xinian that, as a human, he should be afraid of guns. Ordinary humans are indeed easily killed by guns. However, as Xinian stared at the dark muzzle pointed at him, he found it difficult to muster even a hint of fear. If it had been the day before yesterday, it would have been fine, but now, with a body of steel. Xinian wanted to politely say to the robbers, please kill me. However, considering the hostages present, he reluctantly crouched down. After intimidating all the customers and employees, the 3 robbers, one of whom guarded them with a gun, began smashing the counter with a custom hammer, pocketing a large amount of jewelry into their backpacks. This lasted for about 3 minutes. Before the robbers could pack all the jewelry in the store, a sharp and loud sirens blared as several police cars, their rooftop lights flashing, screeched to a halt on the road outside. Boss, the police are here. A masked, burly black man exclaimed. Shut up. What are you afraid of? We have hostages. Pull them out and block the way. The robber leader spoke furiously, then immediately took a gun from one of his men, flipped the safety, and fired a barrage of bullets toward the door. The gun's muzzle erupted with a volley of bullets, shattering the glass door and turning the police car blocking the door into a sieve. The police who got out of the car on the other side were about to fire back, but they found that inside the jewelry store, 2 other burly robbers were already holding guns, intimidating customers and employees to move to the front of the door. What's the situation at the scene? More police cars, sirens blaring, arrived to provide support. Soon, the jewelry store was completely surrounded. A stern-faced, middle-aged officer stepped out of one of the cars. Officer George. One officer immediately stepped forward to report. What's the situation at the scene? Officer George demanded decisively. The officer swallowed, moistening his dry throat, and quickly replied, there are 3 robbers, armed with powerful weapons like AKs, as well as pistols. They're holding the store employees and customers hostage, 4 men, 7 women, and a student who appears to be Chinese. Are the snipers in place? Yes. But the robbers are very alert, hiding behind the counter and the hostages. What are they asking for? Officer George continued. A van, to take the jewelry away. That's a nice thought. Officer George sneered. Undeterred by the danger, he used the makeshift shelter created by several police cars to move closer. This distance. The hostages were clearly visible lined up near the store entrance. The 3 robbers stood behind them, their weapons and the corners of their clothing barely visible. Wait. Officer George's eyes suddenly widened as he stared at the young hostage. A thought struck him, why was he there? As Officer George saw the black-haired boy, he seemed to see him too and made a subtle gesture. Officer George's body trembled, his mind ablaze with questions. But the boy's gesture was signaling, I'm breaking out. Inside the store, Nian stood near the door, his head held at gunpoint by a robber. He wasn't panicking at all, even a bit bored. This was his first time being robbed and held hostage, a truly novel experience. But as time went on, it became boring. So Nian decided to take action. Normally, he would have Guan Luo notify his aunt, and within a minute, someone would have descended from the sky and tossed the three robbers into the air. But now, with his iron body as a safeguard, Nian was completely confident he could handle the situation on his own. He hadn't taken action just now, only out of concern for the safety of the other hostages. Fortunately, the three robbers had finally gathered, and coincidentally, they were standing directly behind him. Although his back was to them, Nian, with Guan Luo transmitting his thoughts, was fully aware of their positions and movements. In a flash, without hesitation, Nian launched an attack. His elbow suddenly thrust back with all its might, piercing the soft flesh with pinpoint accuracy. Wow! The masked black man screamed in agony as his unprotected lower abdomen was struck. His eyes rolled back like a convulsing shrimp. Nian seized the opportunity to wrestle the gun from his opponent's hand. Like a hot-blooded young man, unfazed by the gunfire, he knocked another of the robbers' men to the ground. The sudden scene shocked everyone inside and outside. Damn it! The robber boss, who was negotiating with the police, saw this and roared in anger, pointing his gun at the teenager who had knocked the robbers to the ground. But at that moment, he felt a pain under his right armpit, as if something had pierced him, and for a moment, he was unable to lift his gun. Nian kicked the knockdown robber in the face, knocking him unconscious. Then, fearlessly, he turned and lunged at the robber boss. Snap! The robber boss's already weak right hand was thrown by this attack, and the AK in his hand flew out. Nian pinned the robber boss to the ground with both hands. The robber boss's eyes turned red, and his left hand grasped the teenager's throat tightly, his fingers like iron clamps, and his arm bulged with hideous veins. Woo-woo! Nian pretended to be out of breath and held the boy down with great difficulty. The scene was in chaos. Without the threat of the robbers' guns, the hostages panicked and fled toward the door. The police outside froze for a moment, but Officer George was the first to rush in. Bang! Officer George fired a clean shot, knocking the robber's henchman, who had just risen from the ground and was trying to grab his gun, to the ground. Then, his eyes reddened, he rushed toward the two men struggling on the ground. Let him go. Officer George rushed closer and shot the leader of the robbers in the left arm. Blood splattered, and the leader immediately released his grip on the young man's throat. He groaned in pain, clutching the bleeding gunshot wound and curling up. Nian, are you okay? After confirming that all the robbers were incapacitated, Officer George hurriedly glanced at the young man sitting on the ground. What can I do? Nian asked, blinking. Officer George. Was his worry in vain? Yeah, it's just that the pinching is a bit sickening. Nian touched his neck, his face grimacing. I'll call an ambulance. Officer George exclaimed in shock. No, Uncle George. Nian waved his hand and said bluntly, I just thought his hands reeked of cigarettes and gunpowder, which was sickening. You kid. Officer George glared at him, his heart still pounding. Do you even realize what you just did? They had guns. How dare you? Nian didn't know what to say. He had been very restrained. If he hadn't wanted to overtly expose his Iron Man, his abilities, and the safety of the other hostages, he could have easily chosen to stand firm against them. At that moment, more police officers rushed in and escorted the three wounded robbers away. Nian stood up and dusted his pants. As if remembering something, he reached over and picked up a wrapped gift box from the scattered jewelry. I bought this with my own money. Looking at the gift box in the boy's hand, Officer George fell silent, unable to find the words to question him. He knew why Nian was there. Horizontal ellipsis. The police car was speeding along the road. Outside the window, night had quietly fallen. Officer George was driving the car back home, while Nian was sitting in the back seat. The two, one big and one small, were silent. From childhood to adulthood, Nian and Officer George had never been alone together. Between them, there was always a proud and beautiful girl with short hair. Officer George treated her like the apple of his eye. She was like a playmate in Nian's hand. How dare you do that just now? You were so impulsive. Officer George broke the silence in the car and scolded. Nian spread his hands and said, It's evening now. I was afraid that if I delayed any longer, I would miss Gwen's coming-of-age ceremony dinner. That can't be like that. Hearing about Gwen, the sternness on Officer George's face softened immediately. He pondered, from now on, you must be steady in what you do. If you can't even protect yourself, how can you protect Gwen? I understand, Uncle George. Nian nodded in agreement. He suddenly noticed that Officer George's hands, which were gripping the steering wheel, were trembling slightly. Officer George's hands were shaking? As if noticing Nian's gaze through the rearview mirror, Officer George coughed lightly. I'm not doing this for you. I'm just afraid that if something happens to you, how will I explain it to Gwen? I understand. Nian didn't care. He smiled and suddenly said, for Gwen. Officer George paused. He looked straight ahead, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but rise. He suddenly felt that this kid was more pleasing to the eye than ever before. He also said in his heart, for Gwen. Chapter 173 Dirty, Weird Gwen. With Officer George present, Nian arrived smoothly at Gwen's residential complex before the family dinner. It could be said that Officer George personally drove him there. After that narrowly escaped danger, Officer George's opinion of Nian had changed dramatically. He had originally disliked Nian for appearing too weak, perhaps unable to protect his beloved daughter. So, Nian's direct confrontation with the three robbers had completely caught him off guard. If Nian knew Officer George's thoughts, he'd be speechless. Gwen could lift a four-wheel drive car and crush a skull with her bare hands, so how could Spider-Girl need protection? It was a good thing she didn't bully anyone. As for her frequent encounters with extraordinary crises, that was because Gwen's sense of justice was so high that she would rush into any extraordinary event. The elevator reached a door on the 10th floor, and Officer George took out his key to open it. Upon opening it, he saw two guests already arrived in the living room. A beautiful young woman in her 30s, still graceful and charming, was sitting on a sofa, shaking hands and chatting with Gwen's mother, Mary Jane. A white boy, about 11 or 12, sat on a nearby sofa. A small, malnourished boy was being rubbed on the head and lectured by a short-haired girl in a long black and white dress. Nian was slightly stunned. These two guests, one large and one small, looked familiar. Honey, you're back. Mary stood up in surprise as Officer George opened the door and walked in. When she saw Nian following behind her, her surprise was even greater. Oh my goodness, little Nian's here too. Come on in. Dinner's almost ready. The short-haired girl also stood up, a flicker of confusion in her jewel-like eyes. Dad, why did you come in with him? When did their relationship become so close? But she didn't ask aloud. The boy and the girl met each other's gazes, and for a moment, they stood still, as if their eyes were fixed on each other. Nian felt that King Mei looked different today. Her short, shiny golden hair was parted to the side, revealing a delicate face. A swaying silver earring adorned one of her small earlobes. Her graceful neck, curved like a collarbone, curved downward, and her figure, somewhere between youth and maturity, was gently wrapped in a dress. The top of the dress was a pure white, outlining her rounded, alluring curves, defined by her slender waist. The lower section of the dress shifted to darker black. Her already slender, firm legs, set against a black hem that resembled blooming petals, seemed even more delicate and radiant, like jade carvings. Her delicate feet, their pearly toes peeking from the front of her slippers, had lost their youthful aura. Her handsomeness had transformed into sexiness, yet she still retained a youthful air. Gwen, you're beautiful today, even more beautiful than usual, Nian wanted to say, but the words suddenly faltered as they reached his lips. Growing up, he had never said Gwen was beautiful. After all, who would say their brother was beautiful? Looking at Gwen, who was in a daze, the little boy next to her suddenly said, Sister Gwen, that's your boyfriend, right? Gwen finally came back to her senses. The light in her eyes dimmed a lot. She lowered her head to avoid Nian's gaze and gave the little boy a slap. No. Ouch. The little boy hurriedly covered his head, his face full of sorrow. Was he wrong? Mary hospitably stepped forward, taking Nian's arm and leading him inside. She glanced curiously at the girl still standing there. Gwen, why aren't you welcoming your good friend? You used to run faster than a rabbit whenever Nian came home. Mom, those were all childhood memories, Gwen muttered. She looked up at Nian approaching and said coldly, You're here. I'm here, Nian nodded, pulling a gift box from his pocket. This is your coming-of-age present. Happy birthday, Gwen. Gwen took the birthday box, glanced at the packaging, and said nonchalantly, What, it's all dusty. Gwen, that's because... Officer George tried to explain. My problem. I didn't notice that. Nian interrupted George. He took the gift box back and carefully wiped it with his right sleeve. When he handed it back, it was spotless. However, the white sleeve of his brand new suit shirt was stained. Gwen took it casually without saying much, which made the atmosphere seem a little tense. Gwen. Officer George's tone was a little angry. After all, in his opinion, his daughter's behavior was really not very polite. Okay. Let me introduce you first. Mary seemed to have seen something. After all, in the past, no matter how arrogant and angry Gwen was, she would never treat Nian like this. She first introduced Nian to the couple in the house. This is Nian Prince, a child who lives in the next-door neighborhood. He has known Gwen since childhood and is Gwen's best friend. Right? Gwen. Mary gestured to her daughter. Gwen was silent, then simply replied, yes. Mary then introduced the two guests to Nian. This is my sister, May Jane. The other one is my other deceased sister's child, Peter Parker. He and Gwen are cousins, so to speak. Hello, Aunt May. Nian politely greeted her, earning a cheerful nod. He then curiously asked, how come I didn't know Gwen had a cousin before? That's because her family has always lived in Queens, New York, and rarely comes to Washington. Mary smiled. So that's how it is. Nian suddenly realized, gazing at the young woman who nodded enthusiastically at him, and the little boy who made a face at him. This woman and boy, weren't they the same mother and son he'd encountered when he'd first transformed into Triad, hunting symbiotes in New York? This little brat, Peter, had even been parasitized by a second symbiote, but thankfully, he'd been rescued. Mary said, okay, take a seat first. Dinner will be starting soon. Okay, thank you. Nian nodded, his eyes falling on the girl who had been silent all the time. Even if he was slow to react, he realized that something was wrong with Gwen. She was angry, the kind that was hard to coax. But Nian didn't know what he did wrong. Gwen. Nian was about to have a private conversation with Gwen, but Gwen took the gift box and went straight into her room. In the room, closed the door. Gwen gritted her teeth, and with her gem-like eyes, she tried to hold back the tears. She deliberately threw the gift box in her hand to the corner of the floor. In less than a second, before the gift box fell to the ground, a white spider silk shot forward and pulled the gift box back from the low altitude. Gwen retracted the spider silk and held the gift box tightly in her arms, feeling angry, aggrieved and helpless. But she couldn't bear to get it dirty. Chapter 174 Birthday, Gwen and Nian. At Gwen's house, the dining table was dimly lit. Roasted chicken and steak, steaming with their enticing aroma, along with delicious desserts like cheesecake and pudding. The table was filled with delicious food. Come on, everyone, put your hands together and place them on the table. Following Mrs. Mary's lead, several people seated at the table joined hands. Nian held Gwen's hand with one hand, and the other with a little boy named Peter Parker. After everyone had held their hands and placed them on the table, Mary closed her eyes and said peacefully, thank God for giving us such a sumptuous dinner. Tonight is my daughter Gwen Stacy's birthday dinner and her coming-of-age ceremony. I wish her success in her studies and love life. I also hope that everyone here will have a happy and fulfilling life. With that, Mary smiled and nodded. All right, enjoy. Yes, Peter Parker said, innocently and cheerfully. Gwen nonchalantly pulled her hand away from Nian's grasp. Nian sighed inwardly. He picked up the cutlery in front of him, and suddenly felt that no matter how rich the dinner was, he had no desire to eat. Strange. Dinner was over. The birthday celebration was over with cake. Everyone seemed to be enjoying the meal, except for Nian and Gwen, the birthday boy. I'm full. After finishing a small piece of cake, Gwen returned to her room and closed the door. Mary approached the door, knocking gently, and said, Gwen, the guests are still outside, and Nian is also here. No sound came from the room. What's wrong with Gwen? I feel like she's not very happy on her birthday tonight. Aunt May's face was filled with confusion. What do you think? Officer George and Peter Parker seemed to have noticed something, and their eyes fell on the boy sitting in the chair. Nian's eye twitched. Is it possible that you've angered her recently? Absolutely not. Peter Parker said confidently. She's the only person I deserve to be angered by. How could I dare to anger her? This made perfect sense. Tell the truth, Officer George reasoned. Even if I angered Gwen, she wouldn't be this angry. I hate to admit it, but you're the only one who could make her this angry. Yes, a reasonable person. Tell me, what did you do to Gwen? Officer George's gaze turned cold, and he looked at Xinian with the same expression he'd always given to a criminal. Although his opinion of Xinian had changed a little, he would always side with his beloved daughter. Xinian, did you anger her at school? Lady Mary approached, a worried look on her face. Faced with the collective gaze of the four men, Xinian felt a moment of unforgivable guilt, a monstrous act. Brother, if you've truly done anything to wrong Sister Gwen, I won't forgive you. Peter Parker declared righteously, ready to apprehend Xinian. This kid must have been bitten by a spider, possessing the power of an awakened super spider. Perhaps this is the source of his confidence. Save your energy, Xinian said bluntly, rubbing Peter Parker's head like Gwen had done earlier. He stood up from his chair and asked Madame Mary and Officer George for their opinion. I'd like to go into her room and see her. Is that okay? Madame Mary and Officer George exchanged a glance. Go ahead. Girls, need to be coaxed, Mary nodded, admonishing him. Officer George hesitated, then finally nodded. Okay, but not for too long. I'll only give you 10 minutes. Xinian then walked over to a door, knocked, and asked, Gwen, can I come in? There was still no response. Xinian took a deep breath, grasped the doorknob, and fortunately, it was unlocked, so he opened it smoothly. He closed the door behind him. Looking ahead, Xinian could see the window was open, the night breeze rippling the curtains and the girl's golden hair. Gwen sat quietly in a chair by the window, flipping through a photo album. The moonlight fell on her black and white dress, and her profile was as beautiful as a finely crafted sculpture. Xinian knew it without even looking. The album was filled with photos of him and Gwen. From 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even longer ago. From two children whose gender was indistinguishable, growing up together to the mature appearance they had now. Gwen, I was wrong, Xinian said flatly. How were you wrong? Gwen continued to look at the album, keeping her body turned sideways towards Xinian. Xinian shrugged and replied honestly, because from childhood to adulthood, you've always given in to me. So, if there's a conflict, it must be my fault. You're not wrong. Gwen shook her head and said bitterly, I was wrong. My fault is that I knew too early. Gwen whispered inexplicably, her face a touch of sadness. She spoke in one breath, Friday night. I originally came to see you to ask you what kind of clothes to wear for your birthday. I originally wanted to ask you on the phone, but it seemed like I had an excuse to see you and invite you out for a ride. Friday night. Xinian was stunned for a moment, then realized, you saw everything. Yes, Gwen nodded. Well, I think I can explain it. Xinian hadn't finished speaking when the girl continued, you still smell like Kara. Xinian paused. There's really no explanation. After the girl said this, her delicate body in the dress trembled slightly, and a few drops of water fell on the commemorative photo album, making a dripping sound. Gwen cried. Xinian was struck by a wave of emotion. This was the second time in his life that he had seen Gwen cry. The first time was in kindergarten, the day they met. Gwen was nearly abducted by a gangster, and Xinian, in his desperate efforts, nearly got kidnapped himself. Fortunately, Officer George arrived in time to save them both, but that was also Xinian's darkest memory. That time, a girl he hadn't even met hugged him, sobbing uncontrollably. My name is Gwen, she said. Don't be afraid, I'll protect you from now on, she added, even though he was clearly terrified. The boy, in return, hugged the girl and shamelessly declared, my name is Xinian, and from now on we're brothers. Wow, what is brotherhood? Little Gwen asked earnestly, aggrieved. Sleeping together, bathing together, playing games together, helping me pick up girls, that's what brotherhood is. Hey, officer, why are you hitting me? Childhood memories faded. Seeing the girl weeping in frustration, Xinian couldn't help but step forward, but was quickly stopped by her. Stop. Don't come over here. Closing the photo album, Xinian returned to the room. Gwen looked up, tears streaming down her face like pearls falling from a string, as she gazed at Xinian in front of the door. Her right hand cupped the plumpness of her breast. Her delicate, white fingers pressed firmly, digging into her pristine white dress, the beautiful thing visibly deforming under the pressure. Am I unfeminine? Am I completely unattractive? Can't I attract you at all? Even if you're dating your aunt, even with Kara, who I'd only known for a few months, you didn't have the slightest desire for me. Even if you were to be a jerk to me, it wouldn't matter. Gwen's delicate body trembled, tears streaming down her face, her eyes filled with grievance and helplessness. Gwen, Nian's heart ached. No need to say anything. Gwen turned away, her back to Nian, stifling tears. I'm so sorry. I was in a bad mood tonight and lost my temper. So, could you please go home first? Don't worry. I'm fine. Tomorrow at school, you'll see that intelligent and lively childhood sweetheart again. She paused, then said, we'll always be best friends. Nian was about to say something when there was a knock on the door. Officer George coughed and called out, it's time. Nian glanced at Gwen's back and reluctantly turned and left the room. As he left, he could faintly hear the girl's voice behind him, Nian. If I had it to do over again, I wouldn't want to be your childhood sweetheart anymore. Not long after Nian left, Mary knocked on Gwen's door again and spoke through it. Gwen, Nian's gone home. I know, Gwen replied, holding back her tears and trembling. I know. Gwen's eyes dimmed again, like gems losing their luster. She put the commemorative photo album back into the drawer, closed the window to block out the moonlight, and burrowed into bed. The girl hugged a gift box in her arms, only this could ease the emptiness in her heart. Nian. Wanda is right, you're truly a jerk, a villain. As he left Gwen's house, Nian let out a long sigh. Guilt wouldn't help, though. At this point, the most pressing task was to coax Gwen into good graces. But Mrs. Mary and Officer George would definitely not let him enter Gwen's room again. Nian glanced at the closed door, then quickly shifted his gaze to the window outside the hallway. Death is death. After all, even if he wanted to die, it was difficult. Nian rolled up his sleeves, unbuttoned the top button of his collar, and walked toward the window. Late at night, Mary sent Aunt May and Peter Parker away again. However, as he left Gwen's house, Peter Parker glanced out the hallway, as if aware of something. Parker, what's wrong? Aunt May asked. Nothing, maybe an illusion. Peter Parker shook his head, and he and Aunt May headed for the elevator. Horizontal ellipsis. In Gwen's room, the lights were off, and the interior was utterly silent. The young girl lay curled up in bed, seemingly asleep. Just then, the silence was suddenly broken by a knock. Dad, Mom. The covers were thrown back, and Gwen, still in her dress, eyes reddened as she looked toward the door. However, with her spider sense, she quickly realized the knock wasn't coming from the door, but from the window. Gwen stepped barefoot onto the floor, took a deep breath, and suddenly opened the window with both hands. Her eyes were suddenly illuminated by the moonlight. The young man's figure came into view, along with the moonlight. Hi, Gwen, good evening. Nian leaned halfway over the window, waving in greeting, but his other hand, clutching the sill, nearly caused him to fall from the 10th floor. Nian, what are you doing? Gwen was stunned at first, then instinctively released a spider silk thread, pulling Nian in. Bang! Nian crashed into Gwen's arms, and the two of them tumbled to the ground together, their white spider silk intertwined with the silver moonlight. Are you okay? Gwen was about to get up to check, but was suddenly hugged tightly by Nian. The feeling was just like the boy hugging a crying girl more than 10 years ago. Nian looked her in the eyes closely and said seriously, Gwen, I'm going to scum you. Chapter 175 Gwen, you are awesome. The disappearing Nian. It was late at night, the lights in the room long since turned off. The window was wide open, and the bright moonlight fell upon the young man and girl. Two strands of white spider silk drifted silently onto the table and floor. Nian held Gwen tightly in his arms, inhaling her familiar, delicate fragrance as he lay on the girl's cushioned body. For a moment, neither of them spoke, simply embracing each other in silence, feeling each other's pounding heartbeats. What did you just say? Gwen didn't push Nian away. Instead, she turned her face away, revealing her petite profile to Nian, and asked with a slightly cold tone. I say, you're such a fool, Nian said, smiling at her. Gwen couldn't help but glare at him. That wasn't what he had just said. Listen, Gwen, I called you a fool for a reason. Nian blinked, staring at her, and spoke seriously. Although I've always treated you like a brother, and it was certainly my fault, you really underestimated your own charm. Gwen was slightly taken aback. Nian said helplessly, have you forgotten? Ever since you were 14, when we were in middle school, I haven't casually put my arm around your shoulder like I used to. You were so adorable back then, I was afraid you'd bully me since you didn't know anything, so I deliberately stayed away from you. But you were so clingy back then, so I had no choice but to continue treating you like a brother. Using that brotherly identity to control myself. Over the years, whenever I was tempted by you, I had to treat you like a brother, a best friend. But that wasn't a solution, because you were developing so quickly. After a while, I had to instinctively ignore some of your physical details. Only then could I resist the temptation and continue to be friends, brothers. They say girls mature earlier than boys, but Nian matured much earlier than Gwen, by a full 16 years. Now, do you understand? Nian looked at Gwen, whose face was slightly stunned and confused, and said sincerely, "It's not that you weren't tempting, it's that you were charming too early, so I had to use other identities to control myself." "How is that possible? Are you lying to me and deliberately coaxing me?" Gwen's eyelashes trembled, and she was a little unconvinced. "So, I'm a bad guy, and you're a fool." Nian laughed. "How can you not be attractive? You underestimate yourself too much? You know, you are the recognized #1 in our school. Actually, every time you send me private photos, I secretly collect them, well, especially the swimsuit and pajamas series photos." Hey. Gwen's cheeks flushed slightly, and she muttered, "But you never reply to the comments." Nian felt helpless and said, "How to comment? Should I tell you to come to my house? Officer George would probably kill me." Gwen's face flushed, and she didn't dare to speak. Nian took all the energy and simply said everything he wanted to say. "Every time I go out with you, or when you do sports, I sometimes peek at your collar. After all, that part of your body is growing so fast, like a little cheese bun that suddenly becomes a cute white bunny. That's why I take you to the clothes store once a month, and even if you forget, I'll remind you. And your legs are just amazing, aren't they? Flexible, elastic, even, and slender. Even the best swan dancer in the world would dream of such perfect legs. Your tiny feet, in particular, are like works of art, wide and delicate, with soft, beautifully pink soles and incredibly sensitive. Your lips are amazing too. They're so flexible and elastic, as if they have a natural resistance, making you want to play with them even harder, and you can easily fall for them." Listening to Nian's half-confessional, half-sexualized words, Gwen's face flushed even more, her short golden hair spread out, and a wisp of heat rose from her head. "Now you believe you're attractive, don't you?" Nian shrugged. "Nian, you're such a pervert. You're such a pervert." Gwen snorted lightly, and the previous coldness disappeared, as if they were back to the time when the two of them were bickering. "So you should know how hard it was for me to endure in the past." Nian did not refute, and responded seriously. "Is it wrong for a man to be a little perverted? I don't believe it." Gwen looked straight at him. "Unless you kiss me." Nian's heart was pounding, looking at Gwen's charming little face and her soft lips painted with light lipstick. "Do you know what you are saying? Gwen, I'm cheating on you." Nian's breathing became a little faster, and he said seriously, "If you consider it from a brother's perspective, I suggest you kick me and send me out of the room, or call your father in and give me a volley of bullets. Don't talk nonsense, you owe me this," Gwen said hatefully. Looking at the stubborn and persistent girl, Nian no longer hesitated. He held Gwen's little face and covered it gently. Because of being exposed to the night wind just now, Nian's mouth looked a little dry, but now it was quickly moistened by the moist warmth. Nian sucked the girl's familiar and sweet medium. The Lord of the Dependence was triggered, and the body began to awaken the physical ability of the super spider. The same spider sense makes the senses more delicate and sharp when the two are in contact without distance. And with the same spider physique, once they are in such an intertwined contact, it will be out of control. The rapid breathing and water sounds of both sides sounded quietly in the dark room. But at this moment, knock knock knock. There was a knock on the door from the door of the room, and the voice of Officer George's inquiry came from outside the corridor. "Gwen, what happened? I seemed to hear something just now." Inside the door, in the darkness, the short-haired girl's eyes were misty, and her small mouth was breathing hot air. She pretended to be calm and responded, "No, nothing. It's just that the wind was too strong and blew the window open. I'm closing the window now." What's wrong?" Officer George continued to ask. "It's okay, I accidentally kicked the chair." Gwen suppressed the sound in her throat and responded calmly. But it was Nian who turned his target to the wide and delicate earlobe. Listening to the swallowing and biting sounds magnified countless times, the hot breath slapped on the side of her face, and Gwen's body was soft and unable to gather a trace of strength. Gwen bit her lip and shouted outside, "Dad, I have classes tomorrow, so I'm going to rest early." "Okay, rest early." Officer George paused, and said in a deep voice through the door, "That kid Nian doesn't know how good you are. You will definitely meet someone better than him in the future. Then he will definitely regret it." Nian paused when he heard this. He really wanted to say, "Gwen is awesome." "I know." Gwen opened her mouth, but she almost whimpered. Until she heard the footsteps outside the door in the corridor fade away. Gwen glared at the boy lying on her body. "He just said that he was afraid of her father. Is he so bold this time?" Nian was about to say something, but he was suddenly stunned. With his spider sense, he could subtly sense a strange and powerful energy, which was converging with Gwen as the center. Swish! At this moment, the lights of the entire huge and prosperous city of Washington went out at the same time, as if there was a power outage. Gwen. Nian was stunned. All the bright lights in the city went out, but the floor where Gwen was lying suddenly glowed with a brilliant energy light, as if it had turned into a colorful screen, or like a materialized dimensional barrier. Nian. Gwen was also slightly stunned, and then her body sank into the mysterious floor, with no room to escape. Nian immediately hugged Gwen's body, and then he also sank in. The floor, which had undergone a qualitative change due to the strange energy, originally repelled Nian's entry, but as if it sensed that he also possessed the genes of the super spider, it quickly let him and Gwen in. In less than a second, Nian and Gwen disappeared from the room together. The colorful and cool energy light flashed, and then quickly went out, returning to the original dark and cold floor. Outside the window, the city seemed to have restored power, and the city shone with neon lights, as bright as day. Not long after Nian and Gwen disappeared. Step. A bald woman in a yellow robe appeared in the room out of thin air. "Are we a step too late?" Master Ancient One muttered to himself as he looked at the empty room. Nian's home. "Huh?" The colorful starfish opened his single eye from the glass bottle and whispered in surprise, "Strange, Nian disappeared." Meow. An orange kitten jumped onto the balcony fence, its vertical cat eyes looked down at the city below, and its dark cat tail swayed gently. The floor of the room seemed to have turned into an interface of dimensional space. Nian and Gwen hugged each other, passing through the strange and gorgeous mysterious passage. About 10 seconds later, the scene suddenly became clear. Nian opened his eyes and found that he and Gwen were in the sky. To be more precise, it was thousands of meters high. Moreover, the fiery red sun was hanging high above their heads, and it was completely different from the daytime just now. Whoosh! Gwen's short hair and long dress fluttered in the wind, and the two people hugging each other began to fall. Nian, look down. Gwen, who also looked shocked, shouted. Nian immediately looked down. After falling for a distance, their bodies passed through a layer of white clouds, and a modern city came into view below. It's New York City. No. It's different from the New York City in his memory. Nian felt a strong sense of disobedience. That's right, he soon realized. This city does not have the architectural landmark that should exist. The former Stark Industries headquarters, now the Avengers headquarters. Nian seemed to have guessed something. However, he had to deal with the current situation of falling from a high altitude first. Although they fell from thousands of meters, Nian and Gwen were not panicked at all. After all, there is a city below. A city with tall buildings is Spider-Man's paradise. Whoosh! They fell freely until they reached a height of about 300 meters, and some tall buildings were right in front of them. Nian and Gwen simultaneously raised their wrists, and 2 strands of white spider silk shot out, clinging to the outer wall of a nearby tall building. They slowed their fall slightly, waiting for a second burst of silk before adjusting their direction and swinging high. Nian held Gwen's slender waist tightly with one hand, while Gwen seemed to sit on Nian's thigh, her legs tucked together under the hem of her black skirt, as they swung together onto the rooftop of a lower building. Meanwhile, a local news report played on a giant screen in a commercial building across the street. Yesterday at 4 p.m., our Spider-Man busted a gang of criminals on Maya Street in Queens. In just 5 minutes, he took down a large, heavily armed criminal gang. Speaking of Spider-Man, it's been 10 years since he began his heroic career as a superhero. Although we still don't know his true identity, it's clear that he's the best and only superhero in the world. In the news reports, the man flying in front of the camera and fighting the criminals at the scene was wearing a red and blue spider web-like type combat suit. Judging from his body shape alone, he was obviously a young man. Nian and Gwen looked at each other. Spider-Man who debuted 10 years ago. The only superhero in the world? Question mark. Nian, could we be? Gwen opened her mouth wide and thought of something. Nian did not respond, but tried to call the jellyfish-splitting body he carried with him. Guan Luo, can you hear me? The jellyfish-splitting body seemed to have lost consciousness, like a real decoration, and did not respond no matter how it was called. Yes, if I'm not mistaken. Nian and Gwen looked at each other, and said bitterly, we have traveled through time. New York, Brooklyn. From morning to afternoon. Nian and Gwen were in the local library, exploring some information through the internet and books. After a few hours, Nian and Gwen came to a definite conclusion. Just as they had judged before, they had traveled through time. This world is similar to the world Nian and his friends came from, but not quite the same. The specific difference lies in the extraordinary pattern here. In the world of Earth here, there are many unknown villains, but there is only one superhero. Yes, this parallel world has no Avengers, no Justice League. There is no Iron Man, no Batman, no Superman, no Wonder Woman. There is only one superhero, Spider-Man. Just now. The one that Nian and Gwen saw on TV, Spider-Man in a blue and red web-like tight spider suit. Inexplicably traveled to such a parallel world. It would be a lie for Nian to say he was not panicking, but he was not too panicked. In his opinion, since they can come here, there must be a way to return to the original world. Nian, what should we do now? In the library, a short-haired girl drank hot milk tea calmly, with a corner of her lips stained with the milky white, and asked curiously, even less panicked than him. Find him. Nian poked his finger at the Spider-Man cover of New York fashion magazine in this world, and said with a sharp gaze, you and I now have the same abilities as him. In this case, the reason we came here must be related to him. A single chapter has more than 4,000 words, the amount of 2 chapters. Don't say that I'm lagging behind in updating the first chapter all day long, Kank. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.